Hello, everybody. It shouldn't be muted. Does it say muted? Okay. There it goes. Sorry, I was waiting for the thing to start on the phone so I could make sure that volume was off. I should have done it by playing a different video and muting it that way. I was waiting. Sorry. Hello. Hope everyone's okay. Good to see you guys. Happy Saturday to those who observe. And we'll get started in just a minute. Like I was explaining to a guy on Jeff Mackerlane's channel yesterday, the day before. The reason a lot of channels, they'll do 2 minutes of playing video before the chat starts, or 4 minutes sometimes. It's so people who have set YouTube to notify them, the notification doesn't always come in right on time, and they see it a minute later. Or you also don't want to start the chat with like 10 people there, and then 3 minutes later it's 100 people, which is phenomenal. But then you have to start from the beginning, and especially if there's a topic of the day, people miss out on what that was. You have to say the same thing 3 times. So before we get started on everyone's questions, this is brief compared to last week. I've been fighting the modelers some more, and I'm making progress, but man, it's so hard to get good sounds out of modelers compared to real amps. Pretty much any real amp here, at least by the time I'm done with it, you can just walk up to it, turn some knobs, and you get a sound. This I've had to fight. This is an AC30-esque thing. This is just with a little bare reverb on it and a 2x12 silver bell. Oh, it's the Blue Alnico IR. And there's a lot of the harmonic complexity of an AC30 that I've not been able to get at all. Deluxe reverb, closer, and this is with a 2x12 Creamback 65 IR. And I've got the volume really low on my end so it doesn't bleed into the mic. I could probably turn it up, but this is enough for right now. And then the best sounding Marshall I've been able to coax out of this thing so far, it's based on the Friedman. It doesn't sound like a Friedman, it doesn't sound like a Marshall, but it's reminiscent of each. It's fun for practice. I don't have the volume pedal hooked up. I can do that kind of stuff with the volume pedal when I'm standing, but I can't work the knob that fast. But just for basic stuff, doesn't really have the low end that a real one would have if it's dialed in properly. But most people will be very happy with this. And I don't recall if this is one of the York Audio Vintage 30 IRs or one of their M25 Greenback IRs, or whether I think this one that I have on there right now is one I got from Leon Todd. He's got some excellent toys available to everyone. Anyway, so that's what I've been playing with at night after I sign off from working on the loud, wonderful things that are the real amps. And there are, Soapbox Earth says, modelers are the vegetarian hamburger of guitar amps. I wouldn't say that, though. Veggie burgers make no sense to me. If you want a really nice grilled vegetable sandwich, that's great. We could do eggplant. We could put some rocket on there with a nice, arugula for the rest of the world, with a real nice vinaigrette. Maybe grill some mushrooms. There are a lot of really good ways to make a hot, delicious grilled vegetable sandwich, none of which involve veggie burgers or black bean burgers or all that stuff that I've never understood. Hey, I want this, but I'm gonna fake it instead. Just that's the wrong way to approach vegetables. Certainly the wrong way to approach burgers, which to me are at their best a sacred institution. I think it's the modeling stuff is a lot closer to being usable than those things are to being editable. Editable. Sorry. All right. Hey, let's get started. Now, the questions at the beginnings of all these things are always a little bit jumble out of order to how they're actually asked, because a lot of these questions were asked quite a while ago, and the streaming program I actually use just grabs them and pops them in there, and at that point the sequence catches up. So if anyone asked something before Alan Earwood here, I will get to yours. It will be here shortly. Do I think the Deluxe Reverb reissue is a better amp than the Princeton Reverb reissue for at-home practice and recording? They, in terms of the quality, they are equivalent. In terms of the sounds you can get out of them, you can get fantastic sounds from each. And you can use either one at low volumes at home quite well. The difference being that the Deluxe Reverb you can use on a louder stage at the other extreme of things than you can the Princeton. The Deluxe Reverb certainly breaks up in a more predictable way that a lot of people will find more pleasant than the way Princeton breaks up. But other people love the way that Princeton kind of starts to sag and go to hell. It is really a personal choice. They have different voicings. You need to play them and find out which one you like the sound of, and that is the ultimate correct answer. But they're both equivalent quality, and so much depends on the speakers and the reissue stuff. I've got a Princeton reissue over there with a Alnico Gold 50-watt Celestion. It sounds an awful lot better than most of the stock speakers are putting in those things. Hey, Gast. I assume it's Gast. I want to build a Tweed Deluxe in Europe. Any of you knowledgeable folks can kindly recommend a good one. Does TAD, Tube Amp Doctor in Germany, offer those? I'm not sure. Hopefully someone here will have some better suggestions for you. 80s Stratocaster, Jatuka says, totally worn out fret job or a totally new neck? I mean, same price. And by the way, at the same price, you can buy 4 cheapo. Yeah, you can get. Yeah, don't get Harley Benton Strats if you want them to be something you look forward to playing. It depends on what the 80s Stratocaster is. If it's one of the 83 reissues, the very first 57 reissues, those are phenomenal. Get it refretted. If it's just a kind of generic thing, maybe not. If it's a it depends on what emotional attachment you have to the rest of the guitar. If you've got like a, what would they call it? It came out in 87, the new U.S. standard, whatever it was. And it had the 6 saddles that were flat for the first time. The American standard, those are pretty good. The vintage stuff was really nice. So it's going to depend on how good it was when it was new and how much you love the voice of the guitar. Changing necks, in theory, is a no-brainer, but it can really change the voice of a guitar. But I can't tell you from a financial point of view. Hey, John Ram, what percentage of max plate dissipation do I aim for in an AA964 Vibrolux? I don't want any higher than 70. And I only want 70 if I know that the amp's going to be used in under controlled voltage conditions. Now, that's not going to be the case for everyone around the world. But here in Memphis, the wall voltage goes from 109 to 129. And so you don't want to have the amp biased at 70% dissipation at 120, and then you go to use it on stage, and it's 127 volts coming out of the wall, because then you don't make it through the gig. Conversely, you need to know what the wall voltage actually is. You don't want to have the wall voltage be at 110 and you bias it to 70%, and then a week later, the wall voltage is back up to 120, and then things die. So typically, I will bias a Fender amp in Memphis around 55%, 60%, unless I know that it's going to a studio use or that they're always going to be using a Variac or a Brown box and checking what the actual voltage is. As far as the sound, I would say that 55% to 65% is pretty much the sweet range for those. Fender actually buys some cooler than that typically. A lot of the old Fender stock circuits, when you put the wall voltage to where it was, and you're closer to 45 to 55% dissipation. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Within the safe range, don't go colder than 35, don't go over 70. See what you like the sound of. Is negative 33 volts normal for pot max? Oh, you can only get to 50% with negative bias voltage decreased to negative 33. That is a separate issue. And you may have some bad 6L6s or a 6L6 which is leaking DC on its grid, which is going to drive that down. So I would first see what your bias supply range is without output tubes present. So to pull the tubes and see. Typically 33 would be very hot in a Vibrolux, negative 33 volts on the bias voltage. But you may have some bad tubes. It's weird. So I would look for a range of 50 to 35 typically on a bias trim pot setup, somewhere around there. And that should set a pair of 6L6s very happy. And if not, you may have 6L6s that are impossible to bias. Actually, it wouldn't be leaking voltage DC on its grid because then it would be too hot. Some tubes just don't bias upright. But yeah, 33, negative 33 seems like a normal hottest range in a Vibrolux. So I don't think it's your bias supply. Hey, Natlig, is Lyle going on vacation? Cheers from PDX. Hey, I'm not sure what PDX is, but thank you. Never heard called PDX, anything called PDX. Please let me know what that is. And hey, Yeats, you're asking the same question. Yeah, negative 33 should be really hot in a Vibrolux. Yeah, we're going to London for 10 days, London and Oxford. And Portland. Okay, cool. I did not know that. I know Portlandia. I did not know PDX. Well, hello, Natlig. Yeah, so this time next week I'll be up in the air. I should be almost touching down in Atlanta for the first layover of the trip. And I want to get to Portland at some point. Let's see, Hillel just built a first scratch build low wattage tube app. Great. It worked first time with no issues. Sweet. Nice. And hey, very nice of you to say that, Hillel. Thank you for watching and thank you for paying attention. And yeah, Hillel's building amps based on what I've said on my videos. And he's also a guitar tech, and he's saying what I'm saying. If you like the neck, sure, it's worth it. If it's not worth it, if you don't like it, don't worry about it. Originality is only one thing to consider. Something is original but not that great. Hey, Jeff Harper, if the opportunity to do a Vox AC15C1 video, like the Blues Junior one I just released, would I do one? Well, I've done that to an extent in terms of talking about what I change in them. For the most part, there are a couple little things I keep to myself because, a girl's allowed to have her secrets. But in general, I've been very forthcoming with everything that tech needs to do. And the way that you do it is just exactly the way I showed in that Blues Junior video, and I've shown in many of the other videos where I, snip the leads right at the body and push the leads up and then push it through so we're not damaging the pads. So the process is the same. That said, most of the things that I do in the Blues Junior have to be done before the thing catches on fire. The things that I do in the AC15 are almost purely optional. It is a very good, reliable amp in stock form. I do some things for reliability upgrades with the screen grids, but it is already fairly reliable. I'm just making it even more so because I'm in that neck of the woods, so to speak. I'm already there. The rest of it is optional, changing the voicing a little bit, but not very invasive. I don't want to talk out of school, but I had a very nice talk yesterday with a guy who's one of the vice presidents at Vox. And we've been trying to get in touch for about a week, and Keith Williams put us in touch. And he is very open to some of my findings on some of their models, and we're going to continue that conversation. And he doesn't know if anything will come from it, and I don't know if anything will come from it. And I'm not putting myself out there as, and I'm going to be the guy who saves Vox or whatever. But, I think it's very nice to find out that the executives at these companies, first of all, are musicians well before they're businessmen in some cases. That's not the case for all companies, but I can say that for him. And as it was a private conversation, I'm not going to get into all the particulars or give his name. It's not my place. But he's a musician first, and he loves the industry, and he wants the amps to be better, but that's not his direct purview. So we're going to see what comes from that, giving the engineers there some feedback from the field, some perspective that you don't necessarily get when you get an electrical engineering degree these days. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm not going to do a step-by-step how to mod your Vox anytime soon, because on the Vox, just due to the way it's built, it's some really tricky camera angles involved. And those long videos take, an hour-long video takes me 3 hours plus to edit and put together for you guys. And I've got to watch and listen to it again and again, and I'm sick of myself halfway through the first go-through. Hey, Ward, fixing up an old Gibson GA5. Oh, yeah. Any thoughts on its circuit? It seems like their answer to the Champ, and debating if I should just champ it versus stick with stock components. Both approaches are fine, and yeah, the early GA5s pretty much are exactly Champs. And my suggestion would be to play it with all this, start with all the stock stuff, unless you see something that's clearly wrong. With the caveat that on that cathode biased, go ahead and make sure that the bias is correct with modern wall voltages. Live with it for a little bit and see if you like it. And if there's something about it that you wish were slightly different, maybe look at where the Champ differs and figure out what direction the Champ values would push it, and say, is that the direction I want to go? Maybe you do all the work, you like it, but 6 months later, I did turn it into a Champ. But you turned it into a Champ because that was the design that sounded better to you, not because, I don't know, the Champ was more popular or anything. It's the nice thing about simple circuits like that, especially ones that you're doing that kind of work on, is that you can spend more time making changes to find out what the impacts are and what you like. When there are only 20 components, it's really easy to see what's impactful and what's not. When you get to a much more complicated circuit, you can get lost. Hey, Peter, that's very kind of you. It's very gratifying that Dave knows who I am. I don't think Pete knows who I am, but I think there are a lot more than three of us out there trying to educate players and, in my case, defend players from sometimes their own worst instincts when it comes to buying decisions. And I'd like to thank Dave Friedman for making good products at profits. He's making a profit and he charges reasonable prices, but he sure could amp up the hype around his brand and put stuff out on the market that was not very good. Probably at the same price, just cost him a lot less per unit to make, and ride the hype train until he could retire, and then it's someone else's problem. And he's not doing that. And I imagine that would be pretty tempting for a lot of people to say, well, yeah, I can make $30,000 this year, or I could make $200,000 this year. And the difference being that, they only need to last a year. That's what the warranty is now, right? Yeah. So I don't want to go down that road because it's crass to talk about money, other people's money, etc. But, it's an important thing that he is another one of those guys who has a successful business, but he is not primarily a businessman. He is primarily coming from this as a musician and a music lover. I think I'm entirely correct in saying that. And if not, he will not be offended. Let's see. Hey, Captain Fineweather, thank you very much. If I get an AC30 S1 in, I will review it. I've not had one come in. I don't have an opinion other than I hope that they are built better than the AC10, which is in that same series. And I expect when I open an AC30 S1 that I will find the same places where they cut costs by using maybe some L&D 150s instead of tubes, but I won't know until I get one on the bench what they've actually done and what I think of it. I hope it's great. Hey, Gringo Pig. Hey, RockX. Appreciate you, man. Thank you very much for that. And to everyone, the super chats are always deeply appreciated, but they are not necessary for me to answer your questions. So please don't feel that you have to bribe me. But if you want to donate, I do appreciate it. It makes me feel weird even mentioning these things. In one of my repair vids, I used a multimeter on a spring reverb tank from the wires to the small coils on the inside. I was not measuring capacitance. I was measuring DC resistance, ohms. So I wanted to make sure that the connections from the RCA jacks on the reverb tank were making it all the way to the actual connections to the springs on the tank. So I want to make sure that there wasn't a broken wire. I want to make sure there wasn't a break within a wire, because those tiny wires can have internal breaks. And so you see it soldered at that end and soldered at that end, but there's just no connection. And I wanted to make sure that both, the positive and negative were going from the jack and connected to both sides of the little inductor, its connectors at that end of the reverb tank, and also make sure that there was an impedance or resistance, I should say, measurement, both from hot to cold at the RCA jack and hot to cold at the inductor, and then I repeated at the other end. And so you should see like 3 ohms and 200 ohms and all that fun stuff. So that was just is this really connected? Because you can't always trust your eyes. I spent way too much time chasing a problem like that with the tank once because there was a break inside the wire, but I could see that it was connected to both ends. Yeah, when you make mistakes like that, and you spend your 45 minutes on something stupid in retrospect, you tend not to make that mistake again. Only new and exciting mistakes. That's my motto. Hey, thanks, Bam. I appreciate it. The camera's looking mighty clear. The YouTube rig is really shining today. I spend and have spent and enjoyed spending so much time on this aspect of it. I have relatively inexpensive gear. I have a relative lot of relatively inexpensive gear, which is added up. I hope to add to that over the coming years. But I've really enjoyed spending the time to get to know how to use the gear. Use the gear that you have. What's the best camera in the world? The one that you have that you know how to use. And I think that probably could be said for these things too. One. I mean, I'd be a little bit out of luck if every guitarist had one guitar and one amp, and that's all they needed, and they really knew how to use it. But let's see. We can't all be Danny Gatton. Let's see. Hey, Chris R. His Vibrolux reverb has suddenly got a hum buzz on the normal channel. Replace V1 and the noise remained, but the pins on the OG tube were dirty. Dirty suck it. ISO deoxit cleaning tips. I cannot tell you from here. It could be dirt, but a hum buzz on the normal channel. Without knowing anything else about your app, if someone said, hey, this used to be quiet, it started acting up, and it's not the tube, or changing the tube did not make it go away, I would look at grounding, I'd look at the cleanliness of any grounds, and then I would check each resistor in there. There's not a lot in that channel. I would look at the cathode and the cathode bypass cap. They're on V1A. And I would look at the plate resistors and slope resistors on V1, probably right there. Uh, it won't be the it's unlikely to be the cathode, the shared cathode, the V1B, because that's shared with the V2B. That is the question. And so if there's noise on that cathode, there'd be noise on both channels. But you could have a bad plate resistor, a bad slope resistor. You could have a bad mix resistor. You could have DC built up on the 47 nanofarad coupling cap on V2B. I'm sorry, V1B. All these things can be checked, but I cannot specify remotely what they are. But if you look at my various 60s and 70s Fender videos, which, Vintage Fender is one of my playlists, you will see me chasing down that exact kind of thing an awful lot. But while you're in the neighborhood, clean the sockets. Don't use deoxit because deoxit leaves residue. Use isopropyl. If I have a really, really dirty socket, sometimes I use deoxit, but then I'll flush it out after that multiple times with isopropyl because deoxit leaves conductive residue, or it can. Or it can, even if itself is fine, it can trap particles of stuff, which then become conductive. What Telecaster pickup would I recommend to get a reference Telecaster sound? Greg G says. You can. I'm going to suggest something pretty commonplace and inexpensive within the realm of Telecaster pickups. I'd say the Duncan Antiquity is hard to go wrong with. You can go more right than that, but it's hard to go wrong with that. But Duncan and DiMarzio both have sets that they call essentially 50s Tele or 60s Tele, and they're probably going to be about $75 to $100 each. They're not going to be bad at all. The Fender, I don't know what's currently being made. Back in the 90s, I would have said the Fender reissue pickups are pretty much the reference. Just get just whatever they were sticking in the 57 and 62 reissues. But I don't know what Fender's doing these days. Hey, Randy Steffi, Stu Mac definitely has very affordable pickups, and some of the golden era, whatever they're calling them, sound very good, and others not so much. And some of the humbucker pickup covers that they sell are really bad quality. But that's not going to be an issue with the single coil stuff. But as far as a reference Telecaster sound that you can just go buy, the Antiquity series is pretty much a safe bet, even if it's not your ultimate sound. Oh, I think you're all right, Dan. It's an AC30 Custom Classic for $400. That's about the going rate for them these days, at least the ones I've seen. They're fine amps, but the Custom series is. Oh, it is a C2. Sorry, my brain added an extra C. Yeah, $400 for an AC30 C2. That would be a good price. Sorry about that, Dan. For some reason, I saw CC. It's a very confusing naming convention they came out with for subsequent models like that. Hey, Gast. Yeah, the UA stuff are good. I don't think that they're as good or as accurate as the reviews have made them seem. I think that they do a lot of what the real amp that they're modeling does. They don't seem to do everything that the real amps do. My only concern is that at $400 or $500 a pop, you're spending an awful lot of money to just have those amp models. I don't know what the Fractal FM3 costs right now. I think it's more expensive than 3 of the UA stuff. I'm not sure. But even with some careful tweaking, the Helix stuff can sound really close to that accurate, but you get so many other sounds. And the Tonex stuff is scary. A lot of good options for us. I mean, it's really a golden time for sounds for players. Used to be that you had one amp and that was it, and oh my God, you got a fuzz pedal, you were set. I mean, I came up in the day when like people had 2 or 3 pedals, and people didn't have the same two or three pedals, so everyone had a different sound. And back in my day, and cooks for a nickel and all that bullshit, but it is true that when you have fewer parameters, you have more constraints, people tend to be very creative within those constraints. Whereas if you can do anything, it's harder to, if the box is really big, it's really hard to break out of that box. I've always found it interesting how David Bowie would set up constraints for a song or an album or a project and say, we're not going to do this, we're going to limit ourselves to this. This is the concept. And I found it myself with the modeling stuff. When you have all these options, you can end up second guessing yourself. And it's so much harder to get a great sound without exploring all that stuff. Whereas a really good app, hey, set it to knobs to noon. All right, now let's turn the treble up a little bit. We're done. Hey, Brett, any thought on continuing the Blues Junior for video format for other known issue apps? It is now a practical textbook for all, and I thank you for it. Well, thank you for that, Brett. Don't tell the Texas school boards that I write textbooks, or they'll ban me, those bastards. But I will do that on an as possible as I have the time for, as I find it beneficial to people basis. And I'll space them out, because if I were to do the same kind of video on, say, a Hot Rod DeVille next week, and then the following week I did the same kind of video on, hey Jeff, on a Deluxe Reverb, it'd be very repetitive. It's a lot of the same information over and over again. So I try to keep. I've been very focused heavily on the Fenders and a few Marshalls of late. And I like to vary the videos, but the videos reflect what the workload is. After this stream today, we've got the new tubes to install and bias in this 59 reissue Bassman, and I got the replacement hardware for it because the hardware that came with it was all mangled up. And it'll be together, and then I'll be ready to compare the 59 reissue to the actual 58 that's here. And that'll be a fun video. You can't plan for that, having those two amps here at the same time. And I might do a thing if I can get that. I'm going to try to get that Marshall Super Bass done over the weekend as well, and then it'd be interesting to see how the Super Bass, which is derived from that same circuit at similar settings, compares. I'll see what I can do. So I never quite know what I'm going to do ahead of time. I just, hey, of the things that I'm working on, someone might be interested in this kind of thing. Yeah, Ward, I'm doing the same thing. When I'm practicing here, Idiot plays while Jeff McErlane's in the chat, but I do pay attention to your lessons. That's my practice. That's my late night thing. And let me turn it up a little bit so I can hear it better. But that same preset, if I turn off the amp modeling, and I've got delays and I've got a delay and overdrive pedal all hooked up in that preset into a real Deluxe Reverb. The real Deluxe sounds a lot better. The real Deluxe, even at 2, I've got to watch that volume. With the headphones, 11 o'clock at night, ain't nobody going to hear that but me. And it's good enough that I find it pleasant to play. Hey, thanks, Jeff. Jeff says you should see my soldering. Yeah, horses for courses. I guess we're the horses here, Jeff. Let's see. Riffs and rhythm. I have a TMDR. Tone Master Deluxe Reverb. Sorry, acronyms, man. Acronyms are a bitch. Should I switch to the Valve version and get a tech to mod it using my specs, or get a custom-built Deluxe Reverb amp from a UK builder like Rift, Imprise, or Garton? Future-proofing yourself. I don't know Imprise. I don't know Gartone. I know of Rift, though I don't know the man personally. I would say that if you want something that's going to be really bulletproof, future-proof, that the Rift option is going to be better than getting a modded version of the 65 reissue. The modded 65 reissue is going to last longer than the unmodded 65 reissue. They're going to sound very similar, but the mods not only increase longevity, but lower the noise floor a little bit. Any of the 65 reissues are going to sound better than the 68 reissues, and any of the 65 reissues are going to sound better than and last infinitely longer than the ToneMaster version. So I don't know what Rift charges to build a custom deluxe reverb. If it's in your budget, I bet you'd be happy with that. And the same may be true for Imprise or Gartone, but I don't know them or of their works, so I cannot definitively answer that. Thanks, Rob F. Hey, Greg G. You asked the tele question second time. I put this in the beginning of the chat, but it's been a while. I'm gonna put this again here. I don't have a Beve. To do this kind of thing, but if you ask a question, I will get to it in the order it was asked. Please, 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 only ask it once, because when the same thing happens again and again, it makes it harder to see things. On that note, you did do the question mark before. I appreciate that. At least one question mark in front of a question makes it easier for me to see what's a question to me versus comments to each other, which are great. That's all part of this whole thing as well. 3 question marks makes it stand out, so it's easier for me to see. One day I'll hook up my iPhone as a secondary source and let you see what I'm seeing and all the balls I'm juggling at once. But that'd be probably just for Patreons, OnlyFans. How much of a power rating safety margin do I need when choosing speakers? Would 4 35-watt speakers be enough to handle a 100-watt amp? Thanks. Yeah, well, with the caveat that parallel is safer than series, because if one were to go out, the entire thing can then have a chain reaction of failure, where it's just slightly more reliable than parallel typically. But you're looking, if you have 4 135-watt speakers, that's 150 watts handling. So yeah, you'd be fine. That's 50% above and beyond. That's 150% safety margin. In general, that's what you want to shoot for. I would say 35 to 40% over. So if you have a 50-watt amp, you'd want to have, you can get away with a 65-watt, but a 75-watt would be easier. Oh, you deleted in the tele pickup question. Okay, I see, Greg. Yeah, I appreciate you trying to do that. I do see messages retracted, but delete doesn't always work. I'm not sure what the difference is from my perspective. I see a couple of message retracteds here, but I don't know what was said. Or actually, what I think might be happening is I'm seeing the live comments on YouTube from a YouTube window from one browser, and then I'm seeing them in the order that they were asked within the streaming program I'm using. And I bet that on the YouTube it says message retracted, but on the thing that I'm actually seeing, it doesn't retract the message. So anything that you guys said about me, Brad Thorne or Chris R, that you were then retracted, I will find out. I have a very particular set of skills. I will find you. I will solder you. I will use the braid. Hey, have you ever had a look inside a Two Rock Studio Signature? How good is Master for low volumes? Kay, I have not. I've been inside a couple of Two Rocks in my time, but that was under the previous management, previous ownership, and I don't know if anything has changed, if anything has changed for the better, if anything's changed for the worse, and then I have no experience with that particular model. The Two Rocks I've been inside have been very, very good, and from what I know of the company in its current state, they're doing great work. So I hope that it's fantastic, and I don't know how good the Master is for low volume. So I haven't used the amp, sorry. Hey, Governor, what type and gauge wire do I recommend for 100-watt JCM 800 speaker cable? I've heard that lamp cord is okay to use. Sure. Is there a benefit to using high-quality speaker cable? If you're flying a PA rig with 3,000 watts 100 feet in the air, yeah, you need to use really nice stuff. If you're connecting the speakers in a guitar cab, 18 gauge is fine. 16 gauge is fine. It doesn't have to be anything. It doesn't have to be. There's no skin effect to worry about. There's no real concern. 100 watts is really not that much. You could probably use 20 gauge, but use 18 gauge or 16 gauge. It could be lamp, zip cable with a two are joined together. You can be individual wires, whatever you want to do. It almost doesn't matter as long as the all the connections are done properly and nothing is strained. If I were wiring up a Marshall cab, I'd probably use 16 gauge just because it's a little bit thicker and gonna have no issues whatsoever. But if I was concerned about the weight of the wire, depending on the wire, 16 gauge would be fine. Way too much is made of that kind of stuff. People will sell you $300 fuses if you let them. No one even tries to sell better metronomes. It makes me sad. Hey, Alexandre Brouchard. Hello, Alexandre. I am a big fan, he says. Thank you. I own a deluxe reverb reissue. The tremolo is very weak. The tubes are new. Would the roach be the biggest chance to be the problem? In a reissue, it's going to depend. You have a French name or a Belgian name. I don't know whether you're in the States or if you're in Europe. The European version of the reissue does not have a roach. The European version of the deluxe reverb reissue has a solid state circuit. It's a little daughter board that they put in there that takes the place of the roach because they cannot sell the roach in Europe due to cadmium or something. The roach, for those unfamiliar with it, is a neon bulb at one end, and it flashes based on the current within a tube. And the other end is what's called a light-dependent resistor, an LDR, and it has a certain resistance when there is light on it and has a different resistance when there is no light. And so you have the LDR up against this bulb, and you have the whole thing wrapped in black heat shrink. So inside there is dark until that light flashes. And so when it is dark, the resistance is, in theory, infinite. It's usually it's supposed to be closer to 10 meg. It's usually not quite that open, but it does. And as the light hits it, it's supposed to go down and go, in theory, to 0 ohms of resistance. Never goes that far. Anyway, that's connected to a volume pot. And so that is a load from, in theory, no connection to ground, and it just does this. And that's in parallel across the volume pot that works as the intensity level in a Fender. Well, something in that LDR can no longer be sold in Europe, and so the European versions of the Deluxe Reverb and similar Fenders don't have that. So if you have one of the Deluxe Reverb reissues in Europe, which does not have the roach, it could be a lot of things on that little solid state thing that are the problem. If it's very weak tremolo, tubes are new. New tubes do not always guarantee a good tube. V5 is the tube in question. It's a 12AX7 supposed to be. Make sure you don't have a 12AT in there by mistake or something. But if you swap V1 and V5 and the sound stays the same, and the guitar sounds good, it is a good tube. It's hard there are a lot of variables here. If it is a roach in a new reissue, the roaches don't fail very often. Neither does the tremolo, who tend to get very weak in this. There are in the reissue, though, with or without the roach, there's some added capacitors, added electrolytic capacitors. I think a 4.7 microfarad right across the switch, the foot switch connection. Those can sometimes act up. I would take it to a tech if it's not just a tube swap. It's probably something simple, but I cannot tell you anything more than that from here. Sorry. I know I've given you tons of information, none of which may be useful to you, but now you have it, so. Have I ever shielded a reverb tank? Your house is noisy, Greg G. I have not. In theory, the reverb tank is already shielded against most things because it is in a steel enclosure. on three of the four sides. Sorry, five of the six sides. It's a rectangular cube wire, and you can put aluminum foil on the cardboard beneath it. That'll give you shielding from the sixth side, but that shielding only is effective against certain things. If you have really big magnetic fields in your house, it won't do anything. You'd have to use Mu metal. Now, Mu metal is very expensive and very heavy. Sometimes there are environments which are hostile to single coils. And so there are places where you don't want to use your old Strat. Well, the technology of how a reverb tank works is not that dissimilar to how a Strat pickup works. So there are environments where you just won't be able to use Fender Reverb very well. Those environments electrically did not exist when the amp was designed. So if you have really bad wiring in your house, it can be very expensive to apply the Band-Aid at the reverb tank. It might be cheaper. It's certainly more effective to bite the bullet and hire an electrician, even if they just come out and they say, "Well, I can't do anything about your entire panel, but I can take the refrigerator from this line to another line." And I'm talking about US voltages, and maybe we could talk about sinking a ground outside your studio wall and running the outlets, and there's one outlet to that ground, which is a new copper rod sunk 8 feet down in the earth. Sometimes, and I'm not a licensed electrician, and I don't know what your state codes are, et cetera, et cetera. What I just suggested is legal some places. It's not legal other places. But sometimes, and it's a free thing to find out, sometimes you will have a grounded earth rod for your house, and the soil is just too dry for it to do any damn good. And you can talk to an electrician about this, but if you were to just find where the ground earth rod is for your house, sometimes just putting the hose on the ground there and turning it on just a trickle and leaving it for a couple hours, so that the dry ground making contact for your earth rod gets filled up with water and just becomes moist, you can have magically improved ground connections. But I am not a licensed electrician, and that's as much advice as I need to give out in public on that subject. But there are ways to help things. Most things, though, in your situation do require actually spending money. You don't need to use 12 gauge or 14 gauge wire inside your 4x12, Peter. You can if you want. It won't hurt anything if you've got 14 gauge or 12 gauge speaker wire in your 4x12, but you have absolutely no benefit to it over 16 gauge or 18 gauge. There's the current that's present, and there's the distance the current travels or needs to travel. So the same current that has to travel a mile, 12 gauge is great. The same current that needs to travel 2.5 feet, like from the speaker jack to the speaker in a 4x12, could probably be 20 gauge. We just use 16 gauge or 18 gauge because it makes people feel better. Let's see. Nick Orr. Hey, Nick, is it unsafe to use a guitar amp with a modern electric keyboard like a Nord? I've been using one to give my keys player some stage volume, but had some weird noises on a recent gig. It is totally safe, but know that a Nord, most keyboards, puts out a much higher level than guitars do. Even something, some death metal thing with active gonna fuck you up pickups doesn't put out as much as your wimpy average DX7, let alone a Nord. So you probably would want to use in at least the low gain input on the amp, if not padding it. Probably you'd want to run into. Actually, you'd probably want to run to a DI box backwards to take your line level instrument, low impedance output from the instrument into a high impedance thing. I'm not sure about whether that would work for that. But yeah, it is safe to plug your synth into your amp, but be aware that you probably want to keep the synth master volume kind of on the low side so you don't clip. So any weird noises were probably just distortions, and distortions on a level that a guitar cannot do. I don't want to go far down this rabbit hole, but the signal coming out of a guitar is really, really wimpy, and the first tube can only bring it up so much, and that's why we have additional gain stages and tube amps to get to sound like a Marshall or whatever. But the output of a keyboard is hot enough that it can really clip the hell out of that first triode. No guitar pickup you've ever used can really clip the hell out of that triode, but a keyboard output can clip the hell out of that triode to the point where the triode won't be able to conduct, and its entire bias will stop working for a few milliseconds, and that sounds horrible. It's grid clamping and distortion and all kinds of stuff. So those weird artifacts are probably just turn the keyboard. Yeah, it hurts when I do this. We'll turn the keyboard volume down until it doesn't do that anymore. Other than that, it's safe. Richard Clark, instead of jumping the channels on a 5B3, is it safe or even worthwhile to run the jumper to the input of another amp? You're very welcome. It is safe if both amps are grounded. If one amp is grounded and the other one is not, it is not safe. And at that point, you might encounter ground loops. It is complicated. There are really good quality AB boxes which have ground lifts on the B output and polarity inversion so you can correct phase, so you can run into two amps at once. And you could certainly use one of those, jump into a 5E3, and then you could run you could jumper from the 5E3 to another amp. It'd be better to use a really good quality direct box like Radial. You plug the guitar into that, one input goes to the 5E3, the other one output goes to the 5E3, the other output goes to the other amp, and if you have a ground loop, you lift it. If they're out of phase with each other, you reverse the polarity of the B amp, and both amps have their safety grounds, and that's the way to do it. But if you do plug, say you had a 5E3 and a deluxe reverb, and you magically had no ground loop, and you plugged into the 5E3 and jumpered from one of the other input jacks from the 5E3 to the input of the deluxe reverb, yeah, it's safe. It won't sound necessarily fantastic because you're going to have a lot of load on your pickups. It's going to be kind of dark and you're going to lose a little bit of level, but it'd be safe. Hey, Super Pontes, what are my thoughts on new old stock valves and what are my favorite old and modern production ones? I think new old stock made a lot of sense back when there were a lot of really good quality new old stock tubes to choose from. And now there are relatively few to choose from, and people pay an awful lot of money for them. And there are a lot of unscrupulous sellers, so it's really hard to know when you're getting one that's worth its salt. And unless you're a serious player, you may not know whether you're, even from a good vendor, even a good product, you may not know that if it's really worth it to you, because if you spend $200 on a tube, unless it doesn't work, you're damn sure gonna find something to like in that. That's just human nature. Hey, this bottle of wine costs $100. It's got to taste better than the $10 bottle, right? It might, but sometimes the $10 wine is better. It's just, But when you spend X for something, you hear X, you taste X, etc. I think in some cases it's hooey. I think some places it's a waste of money. There's no need to put a new old stock tube in a reverb driver. There's no need to put a new old stock tube in a V5 and a Fender reverb model to just drive the LFO for the vibrato. You won't hear any difference. Where it can make sense for the reverb driver is not tonally, but in terms of longevity, because there are some JAN 12A T7s from the 70s military surplus that are out on the market for like $35 that are much better and sometimes cheaper than current production. But it's not because they're going to make you sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan. They just happen to be really good quality stuff. Same for 5Y3 rectifier tubes. There's some good quality 70s stuff out there for reasonable prices, which have better performance than, say, the Sovtech 5Y3, which is not a true 5Y3. It's a small bottle GZ34. There's some other current production 5Y3s that are fine. 5U4GB. There are some current production ones which are okay, and there are still a lot of $35, $45 new old stock ones which are better. but just in terms of reliability and being rugged, because they were built to a higher standard. But when you're talking about spending $100 on a Telefunken versus a Bugle Boy, sometimes you'll hear a very slight difference. Is that very slight difference worth $60 to $160, depending on the tube? I think it gets a little bit into a cork sniffery game. Which pick you use matters. Given a functional 12AX7, if I use this medium heavy fender pick versus this heavy tortoiseshell pick, which is twice as thick, if I use this V pick, if I use this red Jazz 3, if I use this .8 Black Ice, the sound will change as much or more from these picks as it more. It'll definitely change more from the pick choice than it will from the tube. So I'm talking. I'll take the V pick out of the mix. We're talking a choice of $2 to 50 cent picks versus $100 for a tube. So that's really my thought on new old stock valves, because it has become such a scam industry these days. If someone's a really great player and they're going to go in the studio, if Jeff McElroy's still here, if Jeff were to go and do a recording session with Robben Ford next week, because he's been known to do such things, and he was to bring his 2-Rock, and he'd say, well, I gig with this set of tongue saws, but for this recording session, I've got these RCAs I'm going to pop in there. That makes sense to me, because you're going to be in a recording studio with a U47 and an old Coles 4038, and you have controlled everything, and you can really focus on those nuances. But to go gig in a bar with a backline amp, there's or not with a backline in this case. He's not going to take a new old stock tube for a backline amp, but there are places where you don't want to spend the money. Say the tube's great and makes you sound better than you would otherwise sound. You don't want to risk it on a gig where you got to make $50. Save that for the studio. Save that for where someone could hear the putative difference. Sorry to be negative about that. I will talk about intermodular distortion of K2. We will get there right when we come back. We're going to take our first 7-minute intermission. We're starting 2 minutes early on this, but I have a need, and also I need to get more coffee. So I'm gonna go get my second cup of coffee for the day sorted out, and I'll see you all back in 7 minutes. That's from last week. Let me take that down and put this up. I do have a question about modeling that I have not figured out yet the answer to. And maybe if Jeff wants to, if Jeff's here, he can, or one of you, any of you are welcome to. But there's a thing that I can do with a real amp that I've not been able to do with modeling. And it may be just because I'm not running my monitors at 110, 120 dB, but where's the swell? Where's the big interaction between pickup and let's see, let me turn my monitors up all the way. No Foxy Lady for me. Is that interaction that I miss. And with a really good amp, you don't have to be at 120 dB to do it, but you have to be about 90. All right, so let's take the nagging like thing. It's frustrating. I get a little bit less than a 10% likes to views ratio, and the views aren't what's where do I have audio coming from? From the phone. Sorry. The views are great and they help, but likes are apparently what really drives the whole YouTube algorithm to things being findable and them sharing the video with everyone else who likes similar things. So I appreciate you all being here. If everyone could give this a like, and if everyone who watches this could go back and like the last videos that you watched that you actually liked, that you just never got around to, it does help. If I could get that from 10% to 20%, my channel would make me a lot more money. Maybe I just need to be more likable. That's a depressing thought. Let's see. Can I talk about intermodulation distortion? Yeah, intermodulation distortion. I have a 67 bassman doing this. Have checked filter caps out of circuit. Played with grounding, kind of stumped at this point. Anything else, the usual suspect. 67 bassman AB165 intermodulation distortion. Yeah, there are a lot of things it could be. I will tell you a dirty secret about the AB165 bassman. It's got a stupid mistake in it at V2B. You'll see that there are there's a plate resistor going to V2B and I believe to V1A, and they have different. There's a yellow wire and a blue wire. No, it's V2. It's V2. It's V2. It's on. Sorry, it's on V3. Sorry, I'm trying to picture the thing in my head. Yeah, it's V3. The plates. The two plate resistors on V3 and an AB165 are not doing the familiar V shape on a Fender going to one eyelet with one B+. They're separate from each other, and they have a blue wire and a yellow wire. I don't remember which is which right now. And if you look at the schematic for a bass for the AB165, 3 of the plates for the first stage of the preamp, so it's both plates on one of the inputs and only one plate of the other input tube are shared to one node of the B+. The other one, the odd man out, is going to a previous stage before the 27K dropping resistor. But so one is on one filter node, one is on the other filter node, but because the way the channels are mixed in that going, which then feeds V3 through the 470K or 220K mix resistors there, where they're mixing DC rather than mixing AC. There's not a coupling cap then the mixing resistors. It's just off plates. They are mixing the DC from two different stages, two different filter nodes together there. And that causes exactly what you're experiencing. And the fix for that I have found is that you just say, okay, either move the resistor so it's joining the same node as the other 3 plate resistors, or you move the wire feeding it, disconnect the wire feeding it and do a little jumper wire. Basically, one's connected to yellow, one's connected to blue. Either they need to both be connected to blue or both be connected to yellow. I'd have to have it in front of me to remember which is which. But whichever node the two plates for V1 are on, the two plates for V3 should also be on, and that will take off that probably remove the intermodulation distortion. If it's not that, there are some beneath the board runs in the AB163 that can pick up noise because over time the wires physically absorb moisture and become conductive, and then they get stuff from the circuits that they're passing beneath and the wires that are crossing them. And sometimes removing those wires and recreating those runs above the board fixes such things in that amp. But I would look at the B plus node first. Hope that makes sense without having a diagram here to show you. Let's see. Hey, Skeeter Buck, I've got a new EH7025 preamp tube, and I use it on channel 1 of my Blonde Bassman clone. After several minutes, it loses power and distorts. I change it to my Tone King Meteor amp, and it works okay. Well, use it in your Tone King. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know the Tone King Meteor circuit. I know the Blonde Bassman circuit, if the clone's correct. You may have a bad solder joint on a heater thing. Which, if this were used as a cathode follower, I'd say Electro-Harmonix don't like being used as cathode followers, but for V1 it should not be that. I'd have to see your work inside your Bassman clone. But if it works in the Tone King, it may be that the tube's fine. So, keep an eye on that. See if other tubes start acting up in one amp but work fine in the commercial amp. Gast, yeah, I'm not going to get into Brexit on here, but you certainly have my sympathies. I try to keep politics off the channel, though I think, given my education and love of literature and science, it might become apparent if you squint a little bit. Let's see. Hey, you see. I mean, I know you've been on here. I think I said hello when you joined. I try to see the live stuff, but it's kind of peripheral. Let's see. I'm just now to the things like PDX's Portland. So things are typed at the very beginning of the stream. Maybe I need to go faster. I don't know anything about the George Lynch Mr. Scary Tube mod, Clyde. Sorry. I think it's just adding another. Gain stage to a Marshall. I'm not a Dokken fan. Yeah. Well, hey, Lauren Billington, I have a question about 5V4 rectifiers. Yeah. There are ways to know that, but you really need to do a lot of calculations, and I'm not really set up right now to demonstrate that. I'd really want to have charts and graphs and stuff. Look at the amps which use 5V4s. It doesn't produce a max of 175 milliamp current. It can handle, it can provide up to 175 milliamps of current. The things that are connected to it will draw the current that they draw. And if they draw more than 175, that rectifier tube won't last. But if they draw less than 175, the rectifier tube will be fine. Rectifier tubes, in general, are rated for a certain amount of current, a certain amount of maximum voltage on their on their output, a certain amount of maximum AC voltage provided to them, and they draw a certain amount of current themselves for their heaters. For most of them need a heater winding, and they have a maximum capacitance rating. I believe that most amps that use the GC34 5AR4 can also use a 5V4, but I'm away from my charts and graphs, and I cannot tell you for certain on this. But it's important to know that it doesn't produce a max of 175 milliamps. It can provide up to 175 milliamps. Talking about current gets tricky. I would say I would worry about using that in something like a 135 watt twin. Oh, be people tell me to be careful in London with all the idiot rioters. Well, I got to say, watching out for idiot rednecks is nothing new to me. I live in Memphis, Tennessee, and whenever you see large group gatherings of rednecks, I tend to go the other way. It's just a shame that they have them everywhere these days. I feel so sorry for the poor people that they've been attacking, and it's been really encouraging to see the counter protesters in London and across the UK this week. And it's one of those things. I don't want this to be a political channel. It's about guitars and amps and silly things and hopefully nice things, musical things. But when so much of politics these days is really just human rights and decency and just respecting each other and finding hope and love in the world, it's hard not to get political in the face of this. Is it a form of cowardice to totally avoid politics when we have open neo-Nazi fascist revivals happening across the world? And if that bothers you and you don't like me saying that, fuck yourself and get off my channel. I don't give a shit. My grandfather died. My grandfather fought and was shot multiple times by the same kinds of people I'm told to, oh, everyone has the right to opinion. No. Some opinions have been settled, and they're fucking wrong. And the world cannot advance with those opinions keep being put forward. We've been over this. Race is a false construct, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we won't go down that path. If you're still here with me, thank you. But it's just ridiculous, the extremes I see people go to and trying to be accepting of all views. No, they're fucking Nazis. Hate Illinois Nazis. Let's see. Hey, Mary Lynn Whalen, if you're still here, what brand tubes do I recommend for an old Super Reverb? Best place to buy? It's really tricky finding good tubes these days. I just changed out another pair of 6V6s for a buddy, Deluxe Reverb. He might be picking up in the middle of the chat today. And the previous set had lasted a couple months. And it's really hard for me to recommend any precise brand. I can recommend vendors because they're going to do their best. A good tube vendor is going to do their best to get you a good product. And if there's a problem, they'll stand behind it. So I use Tube Depot and the Tube Store most often, and I highly recommend both those places, the Tube Store and Tube Depot. I cannot recommend which brand that they have, but, call them and say, hey, I've got a Super Reverb. What's worked well for you, for your other customers? And they'll send you something in good faith that should work. And if it has a problem within their specified warranty period, they'll take care of it. They'll send you replacements. They're good companies. It's good companies selling iffy products because there aren't better ones to choose from on the market right now. And new old stock, it's a gamble as to whether you're getting something worth buying and if they're going to last any longer than something else that's much less expensive. Yeah, and I'm certainly not going to be put off visiting any place in the world because of the freaking thugs and rednecks. But I'm going to be going to a lot of museums, and they seem, it's like, it's their kryptonite. They won't be hanging out there. I'm also not a very small man. I'm not intimidated by rednecks. I've been dealing with them a long ass time. Hey, Winterfell 1066. First of all, do you think we're ever going to get Winds of Winter? Ever? My God, that last book came out 3 girlfriends and a wife ago. Oh my God. I don't think we're ever going to get Winds of Winter. And if you're into this, I don't think we're ever going to get the Doors of Stone. And it really hurts watching those things happen or not happen. But on that note, I do reply to emails. I have just been behind the eight ball. I get many more emails than one man can honestly reply to. And I will get to yours as I can. And I'm sorry. Buddy with an H. For underboard connections on turrets, do I solder the underside of the turret or do I solder the underside wire to the top or both? I do a mixture. We need to have, when you have a turret, there's only so many connections that can be made or can be made and then unmade as necessary. So there are connections that when I'm doing a turret board design that I never expect to need to be disturbed, and those I will do from beneath. And I prefer to use a turret which is hollow in the center, and I will use a wire that I can really poke up the center of that, not just tuck it in the bottom, but bring it all the way to the top and then give it a little bit of a kink so it's got a mechanical connection. So I like to do certain runs from beneath, and other things I'll do on top of the board. Part of its neatness, part of its, will this ever need to be changed? Certainly all components should be from the top, and wires can be addressed on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, you'd see the Vox guys. There's the designer and there's the production manager, and they are not the same person. We'll see how it goes, but I think I piqued his interest when I said, hey, I could give you the changes to make on the following three models that would make them 100% more reliable, cost you nothing to build other than you'd have to make a new batch of boards. So the next time you schedule boards to be made, change over, and everyone will, all the musicians will find out and they'll love you for it. But we'll see. Thanks, Greg G. It's much appreciated. Let's see. Top Hat Super Deluxe Mark II, the fat switch is amazing. Yeah, I suggested a possible mod to eliminate the low input while foot switching. I watched the video afterwards, and it's possible to implement, but it's not simple. To do it right, you'd really have to have a relay, and then you get into, well, can I power that off the heater supply without any noise issues? In general, it's not really worth worrying about. And you get the same benefit from, you want to spend $200 making the mod or just get an overdrive pedal to use with it or a boost pedal to use with it. So I'd suggest just using just get an EP boost and probably achieve what you want to achieve, probably for $70 used. Hey, Emmett Otter. Thank you very much. What would happen if I over-tighten my speaker screws? Well, the speaker frame is a piece of metal that's kind of, most of it's like this, and then at the very bottom is like this, and then there's a little lip that comes over, and there's foam beneath there, and that foam is designed to compress against the wood of the baffle. And if you screw it just perfectly, it compresses the foam, and it can't back out because you've got a Kep's nut and the foam has a little compression force, so it's being forced in both directions at once, and everything's secure. And it's like tuning a drum, not as critical, but like tuning a drum, you want to have pretty much the same amount of pressure on all the screws going around so that the thing stays perpendicular. If you over tighten it, you can actually compress the metal of the frame, and it'll be bent down. And when that happens, is that instead of the entire surface being flat, it'll be dipped down at one point, or it can actually pull up when the metal on top compresses. So it goes from this to this. When it compresses, watch my right arm. As that comes down, that comes up, and it actually lifts the lid, and then the speaker never sits flush unless you then tighten everything more. So it's one of those things, just kind of sneak up on the right amount of tension. Basically, you can see me do it. If I'm using a screwdriver or a hand tool to turn a nut, just do it with my thumb and my finger until I can't do it anymore. Then might grab it with my hand, but not fist. Don't grab it with a firm fist. But, whole wrist, quarter turn past that. That's about all you need. If you're doing this professionally, Go get a calibrated torque meter and all that fun stuff for your tools, and you can say, it's going to go exactly to blah, blah, blah each time. Captain Fineweather says, I missed his question right at the beginning. I did not see a question from you right at the beginning, Captain Fineweather, but it's very possible that it appeared on the YouTube thing but was not picked up on this program, in which case I apologize. I did answer one question from you already. That may be the same question, but please re-ask it, and I'll look for it. I'm seeing the live stuff right now at the same time. So if you post right now, Captain Fineweather, I will get to your question immediately. I did not mean to skip you. Hey, DIJ, am I going to check out Rift amps while on vacation? I plan on checking out Zero amps while on vacation. I plan on spending my days at the Tate Britain and the V&A and the British Museum and the British Library and the Bodleian and Ashmolean in Oxford. And I have food from around the world, from Jamaican patties to pie and mash to a really nice fresh pasta place over at the Elizabeth Docks. I've got a whole plan worked out of great food and things like, all right, we're going to start at the East End for a full London breakfast, then we're going to walk around Shoreditch for a bit, and then we're going to catch the tube. We got a 10 a.m. ticket to the Tower of London. After that, we're going to walk over to Catherine Docks, not Elizabeth Docks, Catherine Docks, and have lunch at that Italian place I found on the marina. And then we'll walk, probably cross over and walk up Suffolk, and maybe grab a snack later at Borough Market. And I'm hoping to have tickets for something at the Globe while we're there. And another day we're going to do definitely Borough Market and Tate Modern, and then St. Paul's, and then wander up the Strand and the Fleet back towards where we're staying. All these plans, I love them. I will talk about them with you before, after, during. If you're not careful, I'll come back with vacation slideshows for you. But amplifiers are not on that list. Thank you, Don. That's very kind of you. Love to hear a quick rundown of my resistor type per application thinking. My idea is to replace carbon comps with carbon film for signal pass. Thoughts? Wind metal film, wind metal oxide. Thanks. In general, given that carbon comps are barely being made at all, and the companies that were making them last year, they're making some real nice ones up until last year, are no longer making them. There is a finite supply of carbon comps. I'm pretty much only going to be using carbon comps in 50s and 60s Fender restorations, maybe some Gretsch, Gibson, things that come in from that period. From the 70s and on, I'll be doing carbon films because I have a seemingly infinite supply of those. And on paper, they're better. So if it's a 73 Fender, it's going to get carbon films. If it's a 63 Fender, it's going to get carbon comps as long as I can provide them without having to buy nothing but really overpriced new old stock Allen Bradleys that, you can spend hundreds of dollars doing that versus spending tens of dollars. As long as it's in the client's best interest. There are always going to be clients who insist on it, and in those cases, I will find the new old stock stuff, and I will get old gold, Wima gold foils from Germany and all that stuff. If it's a Marshall, unless it's a very, very early Marshall, I will tend to use carbon films. Most amplifiers, I will use carbon films preferentially to metal films, unless it's something like a really high gain amp, or an amp where the original, say is an SLO clone or some Dumble thing, where the original used a metal film, say a 1 watt R70 or a 2 watt Vishay. If I were building a really high gain thing, I'd probably use 2 watt metal films for an awful lot of the amp, just to have no chances. And a lot of the metal sound that people like doesn't have particularly complex subtleties. when you live and die on the subtleties or something, that these things matter. When it's just like, oh my God, and the sledgehammer is applied directly to the forehead, subtle doesn't matter, noise floor does. Metal oxide, I will use for places where I'm concerned about heat more so than carbon film or metal film. In which case, I'll often look at data sheets because sometimes a metal film will actually have a better performance in a roll, like a dropping resistor, than a metal oxide. And then you see that I use wire wounds pretty much exclusively for screen grids or cathode bias caps, cathode resistors in like a cathode bias amp. So, and there are places in power supplies to choose metal oxide or wire wounds depending on inductance. If you're using a resistor in place of a choke, that can really come into play. But most of the amps I do, I'm using metal oxides for dropping resistors. I'm using wire wounds for screen grid resistors and for cathode resistors in a cathode biased amp, or a 5 or 10 watt dropping resistor in an amp. And everything else could probably all be carbon film, with the exception being metal film for very high gain amps. And I'm pretty much reserving the carbon comps just for old restorations while I still can. Hope that helps. And I thank you very much for that super chat. Okay, good. Fine weather, Captain. Sorry, Captain Fine Weather, sir. Captain. Thanks, Emmett. What kind of dough are you making? I love making bread in theory. In practice, I don't have the counter space for a lot of baked stuff. I can just manage some homemade pasta once in a while, but bread or anything on a larger scale. Our kitchen table would be fantastic, except it has 4 raised corners where the posts come up like that much. It's just the stupidest thing. My wife brought it to the marriage. I didn't have a vote in it, and it just makes it impossible to do anything. Otherwise, I'd be out there like, all right, this weekend we're gonna try to make phyllo, or we're gonna try to make krusel, because you can't buy a goddamn croissant in this town worth eating. There's no pastries, or there's no patisseries, no bakeries here, no boulangeries here. When Whole Foods is the best option, the town is suffering. And Memphis is, in some ways, a food paradise. In other ways, a food desert. I mean, cornbread and a yeast roll are great, but they're not the same thing. Frustrating. Thanks, Chris Butler. Yeah, we're going to be in London, and fuck you, Wes, with your croissant from your nearby French baker. My nearest French baker is on Magazine Street in New Orleans, and I miss him. And sorry, Christopher. Yeah, we're going to be in the London area primarily. We're going to have 2 days in Oxford. Nikki's a pretty well-respected graphic design professor, and she's speaking at a conference at Oxford, as one does. Pinky up, right? Care package, Wes. Let's see if croissants can stay good from LA to Memphis. I'll send you my address, so you need to send me yours. I want to talk to you about some stuff. Hey, Jan Swanson, is the Iconic 5150 a decent amp? Love the show. Thank you very much, Jan. I'm not a fan of the 5150. I have not tried the Iconic 5150, the Iconic version. As far as I know, as I understand, it is a less expensive version of the more expensive 5150. And in my experience, the more expensive 5150 is a steaming pile of marketing shit. It is really badly built. It is really noisy. It is really prone to ridiculous failure modes and costs an arm and a leg. And for that money, they could have built 2 really good 68 Marshall replicas, which is the sound that people really want. Anyway, but I hope that the Icon is magically fantastic, but I've not tried one. But my suspicion is, since it's the budget version of an already existing terrible amp, it might be not so great. But I have not had one in, so that's all I can tell you. I will say, as far as the modeling versus real stuff goes, I started talking about when it comes to the 5150 sounds, the modeling I think does a better job because the noise floor is so much lower, and it's going to last. It's going to do the same thing every time. And the 5150, the dual rectifier, they're noisy, they're unreliable, they're extremely expensive, and I think given how cold the output section in all those amps is run, a modeler with a good FM full frequency flat response system might be a better option. But that's not my scene, so I can't tell you for sure. Hey, Flaming Attorney, what do I think about mixing speakers in a cab? It's got an AC30cc head with a Marshall straight cab with G1275s. Is it worth experimenting with for fun or at home or not? It's absolutely worth it. My main shop cab that you hear in almost every video has got an ET65 and a Veteran 30. ET65 is very similar to the Creamback 65 from Celestion, and the Veteran 30 is very similar to the Vintage 30, but has a little less of that spike around 2K. So those are two Celestions that you might have heard. And I like the blend of that very well. And I can mic each speaker as needed for a slightly different sound, or I can mic both speakers and pan them left, right, and get slightly different sounds. I tend to mic just the ET65 because I tend to use it as a vertical 2x12, though I could also use it as a horizontal 2x12. And when I'm using it as a vertical 2x12, it's much easier for me to physically position the mic to the top one, which happens to be the ET65, and it sounds good. But in the room, I'm hearing both speakers all the time. I'm not a fan of the G1275. I know people who are, but I know an awful lot of people who are not. So I think you should definitely experiment with it, but you should, because it's an expensive thing to experiment with, Marshall straight cabs are pretty similar to each other, given, from a certain price point up. See if you can bring your amp head to various friends' houses or guitar stores who have different straight cabs with different speakers and try it for yourself. I'm pretty sure that most guitarists with a straight Marshall cab and an AC30cc head would, given the range of speakers typically found in those, would probably gravitate towards the sound of the G12H30, the Greenback, M25. You might, for flexibility with use for other amps in the future, you might prefer to use a Greenback 65 or Greenback 75, which have a different sound than a Greenback. But those, or Vintage 30s. Now, the Vintage 30s, the Greenback and the two Greenbacks are going to have much higher wattage than necessary, but you'd be able to use it with any amp in the future. You get a little more in the sweet spot of the output of the AC30, maybe with the 20 or 25 watt Greenbacks, but they're all going to sound very different than the G1275, and to my ear, they're all going to sound better. But that's subjective. You try it. Hey, Christopher Sambuco. 4700 picofarad bright cap on 1 meg volume pot, series resistor to lessen the effect, 100K, 220K, 470K. Thanks. You're talking about the Marshall super lead circuit. That thing is really painfully bright until you get that channel up. You can play around with the resistance in front of it and in series with it to lessen it. You can also try different value caps. 5 nanofarad is not the only choice out there. So I would say get a 500K pot, wire it as a variable resistor, and put it in series with that 4700 nanofarad, 4700 picofarad, 4.7 nanofarad, 0.0047 microfarad cap, and turn the pot and see if you find a magic spot. If you find a magic spot, disconnect the pot, measure what it is, say, oh, it's a 320K. I can grab a 330K resistor. That'll work. Or maybe it either does nothing or it's painful. Okay, that's too much for bright cap. Let's try a 2200 picofarad. Let's try a 1500 picofarad. Let's try a 1000 picofarad. Don't feel like you have to make the 5 nanofarad cap, the 4700 picofarad cap, work for you. It was a choice that was made at Marshall a long time ago, back when people did not have PAs and people were playing much louder in much larger venues without PAs. And so that channel was always going to be up to be giving you this sweet sound of Blue Cheer. But anything below 1 o'clock on that volume is going to take your head off. Yeah, I don't know if it's a good sign that I haven't had any of the S1s in, or whether it's a sign that no one in this part of Memphis, this area in general, really bought them. So I don't know what the answer to that is. I hope the answer is that they're just so good and have been so non-problematic that they just don't come in for repair. But it's also possible that just relatively people around here have them. This is a Fender part of the world. Oh, I know that's just how it works. It's a Fender and sadly a Black Star part of the world. Black Star is the world's #1 purveyor of free lunches. Does capacitance play a factor in taming the shh when installing shielded wires on the inputs? Thanks. It is a factor. It's not the primary factor if you do it right. Capacitance would lower the amount of highs in the signal, which will reduce white noise. But the shielding is keeping that noise from getting added in to begin with, or reducing them out. So I'd rather have less noise coming in with very little capacitance added, so we have a very natural balanced high end that just doesn't have much white noise buried within the signal, than having no capacitance but no shielding, in which case any noise coming in comes straight in, or versus trying to use really capacitive cable, in which case I don't know what the noise level was, but it sure sounds like this now. So the cable that I use for that purpose has got a very, very low capacitance per foot. There's no such thing as straight wire with gain, but realistically, this pretty much is it. Let's see. Hey, Bam, he says, I've seen a few videos on how to mod the trim to go deeper and slower on a Princeton reverb reissue, where everything is nice and numbered. Simple enough. Is the process just simple on a vintage Polaris reverb? Princeton. Yeah, there are 3 factors, really, that you need to bear in mind. The capacitor is used in the LFO. Traditionally, that's a 22, a 10, and a 10, or a 20, a 10, and a 10. And you can increase any one of them or any pairing of them. So you can go 20, 20, 10 instead of 20, 10, 10. Or you can go 40, 10, 10. Or you can go 40, 20, 10. All those will slow down the minimum speed to varying degrees. As the speed decreases, sometimes the strength decreases. You can't. It's possible to go so slow that you don't hear anything. As that happens, it also will decrease the maximum speed, and that maximum speed is set by the 100K resistor in series with the speed pot. So if you slow down the minimum speed, you're also slowing down the maximum speed. So you can change that 100K to maybe 56K or 47K. It'll keep you having a very slow, but it'll give you closer to the original fast. That's speed. Intensity in a Princeton is going to depend on the bias. If it's biased hot, you're going to have a shallower trim, and it's going to have more artifacts. If it's biased colder, like 53%, you're going to have a deeper trim. The other thing in a Princeton is there's a 1 meg resistor coming off the plate, which then feeds into a 100 nanofarad cap, which then has a 22 to ground, and that goes to the intensity pot. That 1 meg resistor is saying, hey, here's the tremolo signal, let's reduce it through this 1 meg resistor. You can put another 1 meg across in parallel, or you can replace it with a 470K, or a 500K if you want to be precise, and you'll have a lot more depth to your tremolo. If you go too much, you can go down to like 330K. If you go below 330K, it'll get so strong that you'll hear boom, 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 boom. So, but it's pretty simple. It's a simple circuit. It works. I don't know about Servicol Super 10 Gast. If in general, anything that I use in a tube socket to clean that is not isopropyl alcohol, which is also called isopropanol. You can also use rubbing alcohol, but you want to use a purity. If you need to use any kind of solvent or cleaner inside a tube socket that's not isopropyl, that's not at least 91% pure, if not better, then follow up with the alcohol, because the alcohol will just flush out any remnants of any other substance. And it's a good thing to have, and it's cheap. It doesn't taste very good, sadly. Let's see. Hey, Greg G says, if I'm replacing the master volume pot on a Vox AC15C1, is there a better pot to use? The master volume pot in a AC15C1 is a 500K audio taper pot, and it is almost quite good. The trouble is, at 500K, it's a little bit too small. You'll always hear it being present in the circuit. In theory, you'd want to replace it with a 1 meg audio taper pot, and then either live with, hey, the first little bit of the turn, there's no change at all, and then it changes, or you put a resistor in parallel across it to say, all right, all right, turn it till I begin to hear a change. All right, so what is that? All right, so instead of a 500K pot, I really need a 700K pot. There is no 700K pot. I use a 1 meg pot, and let me do the math. 1.8 meg across 1 meg gives you 700K. That's numbers at random. I just chose that. I don't know if that's the actual parallel resistor value you'd use. And that would give you the full sweep. And it's just a single gang 16 millimeter alpha pot with a knurled split shaft. So that's a very easy replacement for the AC15C1. The AC30C1 gets complicated in that some models use a single gang, in which case you can use the same thing. Other models use a dual gang because it hooks up to part of the circuit with their attenuator that's built into the head. And so you have to be aware of that. But the master volume in there's, while it's not perfect, it is every bit as good as what you find in a very expensive matchless, which uses the exact same cross-line master volume pot, same taper, and very same value. So if you're dissatisfied with the stock master volume in your $500 AC15, you'd be equally dissatisfied with the same circuit in a $4,000 matchless or Black Cat. So that might lessen the sting at least. I have had one Benson amp in, Jacob. I barely remember it, other than it was well built, but I don't remember much about it. I am still replying to things that came in towards the very beginning of the stream, and here we are in the back half of the second hour. Let's see. Jacob Elkins, have I found any significant differences in mil spec versus commercial wire, different installation types making any difference? That's a deep subject, but it's mostly irrelevant for this. You want wires rated for 600 volts installation at least. I prefer to use Teflon over the various plastic wires. I use cloth-covered wire when restoring an old Fender because that kind of stuff matters to people. But if I were building an amp from scratch, I would not reach for a cloth-covered wire. I'd use 20 and 20 and 22 gauge Teflon coated silver stranded for almost everything, because there's nothing you can't do with that. And I keep some 18 on hand if I needed to do the heaters for some EL34s or some speaker stuff. Let's see. I'm going to try to. Andy Fuchs does great work. While it's there, is adding a PI grid stop to my Princeton Reaper going to noticeably improve the drive sound? I love this, and I'm saying this in kindness to you, Chris, and Andy's great. You're taking your amp to Andy, and you're asking my opinion about it. Ask Andy's opinion about it. He's the guy who's going to be doing the work. And the answer is yeah. The grid stopper addition on the Princeton does make the cathodion phase inverter behave much nicer, and there's no tonal trade-off. And Andy will be glad to explain all this to you. But because when you ask that kind of thing, it sets me up to potentially be in an argument with a different tech. In this case, it's Andy. I know he's going to give you the same answer I am because our answers are based in reality. And so there's only the one answer. Yeah, it's practically a no-brainer, unless it's some vintage thing where you don't want to make any changes because vintage. But yeah, Andy's a great guy. He and the guys at his shop will take good care of you. Hey, Louis from Oakland. Have I ever been shot by an old amp at a music store? I have, but not in the case that you mean there, Matt Johnson. I was at the local shop, Martin Music, that I used to do work for, and someone had brought in, 67, 68 Bluesbreaker. And they had a problem with it, and they had the cabinet out of the chassis out of the amp, and they had the chassis upside down on top of the cabinet, and they're looking at it because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. And I took a look, and I found something. I said, "Oh, that's what you need to do." And the shop owner was able to solder it, so I didn't have to take the amp or anything. It was something simple. It was in for like consignment. But I did the world's dumbest thing, and I wish I had it on video because I'd probably get a million views on it. I was warning them that I think it might have been earlier than 67. I think it was a 67. The output transformer on that was illegal to sell these days because it was like a radio spares or something. It had all these terminal strips on top with all these wires attached to it. And I said, no, be careful. Unlike the amps that you're used to working on, this thing is before safety codes. And so these are exposed B plus connections. And if you touch this while it's on, or even if it's got voltage short, you can get hurt if you touch these. So just don't put your hands anywhere over here. And they said, okay. And I said, well, let's hear what the problem is. And I had a guitar on, I had the cable, and I reached across to plug it in, and I brushed against that very part of the amp that I just warned them how dangerous it was. And I got to prove to them I was right. I actually said a few other things on that subject, but I won't repeat them here. I'll get demonetized. Yeah, that's the one time I got shocked at a music store. But yeah, anytime you test an old vintage amp at a store, any amp that has two conductor wire, especially a 2-conductor power cable, be very, very careful. Most people at guitar stores don't know, and frankly, they're not paid enough to care. Hey, Jan Swanson, if you're still watching, I want you to know that when I said please ask questions only once, management, right beneath when you asked a question about the 5150 Iconic, the second time, that wasn't aimed at you. Sorry, I didn't see that your second question before I said that. I have no experience with any of the EVH 5150 Iconics, as I said, specifically the 50 watts. Big Boss says, gorgeous finish on that Strat. I got lucky, thanks. This is a Musicraft neck on a Fender body, and I don't know whichever Fender was made about 5 years ago that had the 2-post trim. I got this from the Stratosphere, one of those parter outer sellers on Reverb and eBay. But it's nice. It's altered. It's the polyester. This and the Casino are the only polyester finishes I own. Everything else is nitro, but it sounds really nice. And I have this because I wanted something a little more modern, but I don't want a Floyd. So this is my wannabe Lifeson kind of jack of all trades, master of jack guitars. Let's see. Hey, Brad Thorne, thanks very much. Trainers are great, especially the Bassmasters. I love Bassmasters. Zach Lee, amplifier characteristics amplifier characteristic nomenclatures and their meanings. Pushed, bloom, resonance. Oh man, that gets to be tough. A lot of terms are used. One person means this, the other person means something else. It's frustrating. Talking about music is exactly like dancing about architecture sometimes. But nomenclature is tricky with this kind of stuff. Pushed, bloom, resonance. That's really kind of video I think it'd be really good for Jeff McErlane to do because he can really give you his. He can show you that because he's got a wide range of amps. He's always set up to record them, and he's a really great player. And he can talk about from a player's perspective. And while technically I'm a player, I'm not a player on his level. So Jeff, if you're watching this, that would be a great idea for a video. If he's not still here, I'll let him know. So Zach, look for that. But that'd be a real cool thing to have, and that'd be the kind of thing where maybe I could guest on it and say, hey, here's some, ask Dr. Science. I'll put on a white lab coat or something for my little portion. It's tricky because yeah, you end up talking about vague things, and you end up talking about them in a vague way in a stream like this. Hey, Joe Meyer, Music Man amps are are good, but not fantastic, and they have the same problems anything 50 years old can have. Parts availability can be tricky on them, and they're really hard sounding amps. If you love the sound, go for it. But it's one that not everyone will love, and it's not something that I would particularly seek out or recommend. Hey Jacob, he wants to know who makes the most period correct Alnico speakers, Jensen, Weber, Eminence. I don't know that Eminence makes any period correct Alnicos because Eminence wasn't making Alnicos back in the day as we think of it. I would say that Weber makes the best sounding of them for the traditional stuff, and I really like the Alnicos I've had from Warehouse guitar speakers, and I've liked some of the Jensens, but by far most of the current production Jensens are very bright and not as musical as some of their forebears. And don't overlook Celestion. Celestion has got some probably Celestion blues and are the pinnacle of that. I wish they had the silver as well with a different cone, but the golds are quite nice, and now they've got the cream and the red. So I would say of your list, Eminence lowest because they're not making a traditional sound, and I've liked the Eric Johnson Eminence Alnicos, but I don't much care for some of the others. And Jensen's all over the map. We're going to take the second 7-minute intermission. I think Steve Selvage is here to pick up his deluxe, and we are right an hour after the previous one. So back to intermission. See everyone in 7 minutes. Just a second. Coming back from this chat a little bit early, because I can. And it'd be good to get as many questions as possible. And I have a question for you guys. Let me take it off this silly Friedman thing. Just put Deluxe Reverb. I get nervous on these things, and I always like having my security blanket. Is this loud to you guys as I talk? Can you hear me talk at the same time? I don't want to drown you out with my noodling, my nervous noodling, but it makes me feel better to have one of these in my hands, especially when I'm in front of people. It covers my gut. I should grab the 335 or the Casino for that. Let's see. Where were we? Let's see. All right. Alex Aguado has a Freeman PT20, one of the early ones. I'm waiting. Is there a follow-up? I don't see a question, but I'm glad you have one. They're good amps. I guess you're probably when I was replying to earlier in the chat when I was saying that Dave's one of the good guys out there. Hey, Christopher Butler, if you're just doing average amounts of soldering, more than just the, once every couple of months, but not what I'm doing, the FX88 8888DX would be fantastic. The Hackos are great. I have no experience with the JBC style stuff, but you will, if you get the Hacko, you'll wonder how you ever used the Radio Shack stuff. Let's see. Timothy Stakes found happiness with a tiny terror into a 1x10 creamback. I bet that would sound pretty damn good. And, the tiny terror is not a trick that I find myself wanting to do very often, but it does that trick very well. Fender Bassman, a reliable amp worth purchasing, found a used one for $1K. There are like 10 different versions of the Bassman, so it depends on the year that you have, which model it is. $1K. I don't know because it depends on the model. If it's a Bassman 10, it's kind of high. If it's a 165, it's about right. If it's a 6G6, it's underpriced. With any of them, $300-400 can make them phenomenal in terms of just getting them back to where they should have been or were originally. And it's going to hang against a $4,000 or $5,000 two rock. So yeah, on the face of it, most Bassman amps are totally worth it, but I don't know which model you're talking about. Let's see. Tight budget newbie guy DIY question. Read somewhere to get more clean headroom out on Monoprice. Swap out one of the 12X7s for a non. Yeah, you can put in a 12A Y7 any place that a 12X7 goes. You can put a 12A 5751 as well. I keep playing the same stuff. And won't hurt a thing, and you'll lose gain, but it won't really give you more clean headroom out of most amps. A high gain amp you'll get more clean headroom. Most amps it'll just be a little bit quieter, and you have to turn it up to get to the same level. Now there can be a benefit to that if you have an amp which has a bright cap on the volume pot. To get the same volume level, you'll be a different part of the rotation of the pot, so the bright cap will be doing less. It'll be to get the same volume level with the lower gain tube, you'll have less of a bright sound, which might be beneficial to you, but you could also get there just by turning it down. And to an extent, controlling with any treble controls that you have on the amp. That's a balancing act. It's going to depend on the amp. It won't hurt anything. Don't chase your tail too much on the Monoprice and Harley Benton stuff because there's only so much you can get out of it. Don't have that thing modded, but yeah, you get a 5751, get a 12A Y7. See what you think. Don't use a 12AT or an AU in that position. It would be safe, but it wouldn't be optimal for the tube. Let's see. Gotta give me some of them fuck you up pickups. That's right. Yeah, I see that the metal guys. Like Kyle Bull. I check on his channel. And he's got guitars that I would never want to play, and the output of those pickups is just insane. but that floats his boat quite nicely, apparently. Let's see. Are you okay? Hey, Bambule. Guitars and amps rock. Thank you, man. Greetings from Florida. Can my Secret Sauce 6B6B mods be added to an A864 without adding presence? You can make them. You can make an AA864 into the modded 6G6Bs that I did. If you want to add the presence without adding a pot, you can just do it inside the amp. Presence circuit in that amp is the pot's really wired as variable resistor, so you could add the cap and a resistor inside the amplifier itself, and just temporarily put in the pot, turn it till that's I can live with that. That's a good all-purpose thing, and then measure it and say, all right, well then I'm just going to get a 15K resistor, and there it is. So you can do it without drilling. That particular B6 did come out rather splendidly. I think it was a true beast. It sure could have used more of a master volume, but the owner, I don't think the owner wanted a master volume, or he was using an aux box, I think. Let's see. Hey, Hillel. Reverb on your Mesa Tremor Verb H sounds good, but very weak. I'm turning the reverb all the way, almost all the way up. Try the driver tube, and if it's not that, try the recovery tube. I don't remember the Tremor Verb having a fantastic reverb sound, but I don't remember it having a bad one. So it's probably a tube. It's going to be one of two. I'm trying to remember if they used an AT for that, or for the driver, if they used half of a 12X7. If that's the case, it's very likely a bad tube, because that's a really hard thing to do to a 12X7, to drive a reverb tank with from that. Thanks, Rob French. Sorry, Rob French. I can read. I'm sorry, I don't speak French. Rob Frisch. Thank you very much. I'll try a Fuller's ESB, as long as it is not one of the super hyper IPA things out there in the world today. People have decided that hot sauces should all be things only eaten on a dare, and people have decided that IPAs should be hoppy to the point of proving your manliness, and I find both extremes unpleasant. The world is full of IPAs and cilantro, which maketh me thad. Thanks, Catfish573. If I can click on this right, there it goes. Third try. I've been watching for almost almost a year now, I guess you're trying to say. Don't miss any of my videos. Thank you very much. Sadly, I have to watch them all myself. I have not seen any orange amps in. Do I not work on them? And what's my opinion of them? I've worked on a few, and I've got a few on the channel, but they're not that common, at least here in Memphis, among players. So when I was doing the work for the local store, I didn't get that many in, but the ones that did come in are on the channel. And I'm not a huge fan of them in general. I'm not sure how many of them I would take in now that I have more of a choice of what I take in. Is the 60 watt Crush one of the solid states? You may not need service for a long time. They're good. Orange makes good amps. I just don't know that Orange has made a great amp in a long time. And some of their very expensive models, like the what's it called? The big $2,000 one. It's got some really underwhelming construction choices. I'll just say that, but they sound fine. Running a stereo setup with a deluxe reverb and a Super Champ X2 head. Sounds great, but I run into phase matchings. Flip the wires on the cab on the Super Champ. Is this okay? It is totally fine to flip the wires on your speaker cable, in this case. Some speakers, the frame of the speaker itself is also connected to the negative, and you can run into issues rarely with things like that, but usually it's just whichever terminal, and that's fine. The better way to do it, in theory, would be to use a radial or similar ABY box, which is going to have ground lifts and polarity reversals. You could also have just gone from whichever channel the deluxe reverb you're using to the other channel, because the two channels on a deluxe reverb are out of phase with each other. And so one of them would be in phase with the super channel. Remember that if you ever undo that and then wonder why the other channel, is suddenly out of phase. But what you've done is fine. Let's see. Hey, Vinicius. Let's see. Hey, Christopher. No, when I do, I use the same. The same iron for pots as I do for everything else. But when I do the chassis stuff, I use an 80-watt Weller and SBG something. Anyway, it's in the description of the video is what I use for that. I never use a soldering gun. Soldering guns are terrible. Someone's going to say, I love soldering guns, and you're welcome to. But I look forward to the day when I can pry your soldering gun out of your cold, dead soldering fingers. Sorry. Thank you, Martin Reed. Appreciate that. Gringo says, forget London. Come up to Edinburgh, and I'll show you around. London is horrific. Well, Edinburgh seems wonderful, and we would love to go to Edinburgh, and I would love to go to Glasgow. I'd love to go all over the entire island with an emphasis on Scotland and an emphasis on Cornwall, because my families, those that are not German, are from Cornwall and from a little bit of Wales and from Scotland. Lyle Caldwell. Caldwell is a Scottish name, as is Laird, my mother's maiden name. So I am very inclined to go to Edinburgh as I could, and I'd be glad to show everyone that, yes, Scots can tan. I'm proof of that. But I love London. I was last there 19 years ago, but I love museums and I love history, and London is chock full of both, as are Edinburgh and Glasgow. And we will get there someday. If I had my druthers, we would start with a week in London, and then we'd rent a car and just meander. And maybe I would take as a loose map the goal of seeing all the cathedrals and every place mentioned in Shakespeare, and then we just go. But that is not something that we can afford to do right now. But hopefully we'll make it to Edinburgh and Glasgow at some point. Let's see. Which new production tubes are the most consistent, reliable? Jacob Elkins. That is the question that I'm looking for the answer to, and I've said this earlier in the chat. There is no current production tube which is always going to be the most consistent, reliable. There are only vendors you can trust to stand behind their sales. So while I have had good luck recently with the Electro-Harmonix 7025, not the 12X7, the 7025, and I've had good luck with overall with Electro-Harmonix 6V6s and the Tungsol 6L6GC STRs. Nothing is guaranteed beyond, as far as the product itself these days. You have to find a vendor that you can trust to stand behind the product for whatever warranty period they offer, 30 days, 90 days, whatever, and see what you can do. I put tubes in amps and never hear from them again, and I put tubes in amp, and 6 weeks later they're back because one of them red plated, and at that point it makes me look bad. And then I have the receipt, I contact Tube Depot, they swap me out, I put it, and then I look good because it didn't cost the owner anything except a little bit of time. And that's out of my control, and it's out of the vendor's control. All the vendor can do is say, well, all right, send out another pair. And a good vendor will. So don't buy your tubes off eBay. Don't buy your tubes off Reverb. Don't buy your tubes from a big box store that doesn't care. Buy your tubes from a specialized tube vendor. Let's see. Hey, OH says, I know you won't recommend this, but if I were to get a 6505 Plus combo and turn it into a head, Will I find what I need to make it safe and reliable as it can be in your playlist? I'm not sure entirely. I think I've got a PV playlist. I don't know if I have a 5150 playlist, but I've got some 6505s and 5150s on the channel. They're practically the same amp. It's like the 6505 is just a slightly different version of the 5150. And I show a lot of the issues with those. I would not recommend doing what you're doing because there's only so much reliable you can make a PV. And there are parts that it uses that once PV no longer has them available, you won't be able to get. They have some specialized parts, a little bit less so in the 5150 and 6505 than in the certainly in the classic 50 and the Delta Blues and all that. But I'm not sure that in 2024 the 6505 is the best way to get that sound. As I've said earlier before, I think modeling has already done what those particular amps do. And if you really want what that amp is purporting to do, save up and buy an SLO. And I know that sounds snobbish, and I know that sounds blah, blah, blah. But it's the truth. The Soldano is just so damn good, and so much better than what Mesa and PV have done, and what Fender has done with the 5150. Let's see, people talk about soldering irons, which is good. Teddy Ray Thomas, I cannot tell you what amplifier to buy unless I know an awful lot more about what your needs are. If I were to recommend the world's best country amp to a guy who plays nothing but jazz or a guy who plays nothing but metal, you'd think I was crazy. So there's no, this is the best amp. There's the best tool for whatever job you need to have done. Any opinions on Jupiter speakers? Jupiters are really good speakers. I believe they're all made by WGS to Jupiter spec. And the Victoria Vicky Verb amps in combination, I've had Victoria amps in, I've not tried the Vicky Verb. Oh, Vicky, you're so fine. I would have to play the Vicky Verb next to a Swart Atomic. I would expect both of them to have very good build quality. Pretty much equivalent. I don't know what the prices are. I don't know what the Vicky Verb is because I've not looked into that. Looking for a home amp. I did a stream with Keith Williams on that subject a couple weeks ago on 5 Watt World on home amps and practice amps, and I'm surrounded by all these incredible vintage amps all day. When I practice at night, I practice with a Stomp, HG Stomp, and it's fine for home use. In fact, I think it's preferable in a lot of ways for home use, for practice like this, than a standalone actual amplifier is. But, it gets in subjective and just personal preference and aesthetics. And I also have $800 worth of really nice studio monitors here, and I've got a $200 audio interface, and it's not just the price of the thing itself. Hey David, he's been considering AC15C1 as his first big boy amp. He plays a mix of jazz and blues and early rock. Only other contender would be a Marshall DSL 20CR because of the effects loop. In your mind, Vox wins. That is a tricky one, but I will do my best. Let's start with the effects loop. You don't need an effects loop. For none of those styles of music that you're playing do you need an effects loop. So take that out of the question. And the DSL 20 CR is a particularly poorly built amp that's got a ridiculously cold bias. It's just not a good amp. And I recommend the DSL 40 CR for people who want, like, if they're in like a top 40 band and they need to cover a wide range of stuff and they don't want to go down the solid-state or modeling path. It's a good, do everything pretty well amp. And it does have an effects loop if you insist on one, but the 20 is not the same thing. Don't get the 20. If you're playing jazz, blues, early rock, in my mind, it's going to come down pretty much to the Deluxe Reverb, Princeton Reverb, and the AC15C1 as the best choices. Of those, the AC15C1 might be the trickiest to get jazz, what people think of as jazz sounds out of. The normal channel should get you pretty close, whereas the two Fenders will nail that. Blues, all three amps will do it well. Early rock, the Deluxe Reverb and the AC-15 have a leg up. But I don't know what your price range is. I can tell you that, in my opinion, you should just take the DSL-20 out of contention. It looks good on paper. The specs look great on paper, but in reality, it's not a very good amplifier. The Vox is a great amplifier for its price point, but I don't know that it's the right one for you. And when I mentioned the Deluxe Reverb reissue and the Princeton reissue, I'm probably going to need to say that used, because the price point on the new ones is just insane these days. But I think you can still get used ones for 800-ish, and they're very good amplifiers. And that's one of the things that's been really tricky. Every time I sit down, I begin to say, all right, I'm going to do that Amp Center 2K video people have been waiting for. I look at what's on the market, and everything keeps going all over the place. So it's really hard to know what is an amp under $2,000 because it keeps fluctuating so much. Jimmy Pete says, hi, Lyle. Hi, Jimmy. I have a 71 Deluxe Reverb with a hum. When switched on, there's a momentary thump, and the amp hums like an idle lightsaber. Try different tubes. Any idea what may be the cause? Thanks. Well, it's most likely the filter caps. It's not necessarily the filter caps. It's most likely the filter caps. And you need to take that to a tech and don't turn it on until that's resolved. But I want to give you credit for hums like an idle lightsaber, because Wes, that is a wonderful description, and that tells me exactly what I need to know. So well done. But if you have an amp that sounds like an idle lightsaber, something is dreadfully amiss. Don't use it until a tech's taken a look at it. It sounds like you probably have a bad filter cap. Possibly just a broken ground wire, though. Could be something very inexpensive. And even if you need all new filter caps, given the value of that amp, and that probably never has had this in its life, this is a generational service. You put $300-400 into it, which seems like a lot, and that amp's going to be phenomenal for the next 20 years. And to buy a new amp built the same way as even your 71 would be a $3,000 plus proposition. $300-400 of investment to make it be its best is really not unreasonable, I think. Now, that is a price range. It's going to depend on where in the world you live and what people charge and what parts costs are. And that's American dollars. So, but they're really good amps, 71 Deluxe Reverbs, once you get the lightsabers out of them. Oddly, it's interesting how I wish I had the effects set up to make this joke work. It's interesting how bad lightsabers sound in amp, and yet we love the sound of a phaser. I'll be here all week. Actually, I'll be here for the rest of this week, and then I'll be gone. Yeah. Talking about the Foxy Lady thing. Yeah. I can pull that trick off in a Deluxe Reverb on 4, though. I don't ever play with an amp in an ISO booth, but yeah, that interaction is tricky, isn't it? I don't know if a modeler will do it, even if I'll test it at some point. I've got the volumes on my Yamaha set to noon, so someday when my wife's not here, I'll turn them all the way up and I'll crank the send and I'll see how loud these HS7s can go and see if I can do the Foxy Lady thing with turning towards the speaker and all that fun stuff. But so far, I've not been able to get that kind of thing. And that's, and it sounds like a joke. That's the Foxy Lady thing is kind of the gimmicky extreme of that, but it's not really, because there's an entire series of overtones that happens with pickup speaker interaction, and I hear it all over the clean sounds of Jimmy Page, and I can get that with an AC-15 with the master volume at noon, from 8 feet away. it's hard to get with the modeling. Unless I just turn the speakers up. Maybe I just haven't had my monitors up loud enough. Maybe I'll just put the headphones right over on the guitar body, just clamped to the body. Maybe that's the trick. I'm sure there's a plug-in for that. Let's see. Okay, to my political ranting. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. Hey, Jeff Harper. Yeah, there are good 5 watt amps. There are good 10 watt amps. Um, uh, the Fender Champ has been around an awful long time. It's a great amp for five watts. Uh, Vibra Champ is my preference. Then there's the Swartz. You can get Swartz used like $800-900, I think, sometimes. It's all going to depend on the market, but I'm not convinced that that's that useful these days because we have so many other things. I mean, if I had the monitoring set up differently, I could plug my guitar straight into the Motu and then call up a bunch of free plugins in Logic, and you'd hear it, and it's going to sound great. And it's better than most 5 watt amps have ever been in history. And those plugins are free. I'll be doing a video on this soon. God dang, Rhett already did the video this week that I was going to do this week on that subject, but I'm gonna approach it from a different angle. But I want to wait a little bit because I don't want to be like, oh, Rhett did this video on the subject and it did really well. Let me grab onto those coattails. I don't want to do it as a Me Too thing, but I independently was going to do that video, best amps under $0. And then Rhett did it. So I say Rhett. I don't know him. He doesn't know me. I don't have any. I shouldn't just say Rhett like I'm goddamn Rhett. That old Rhett guy. I don't know him. He seems great. But anyway, he kind of stole my thunder, but he has some real good points in his video. But he had his perspective. I have mine. But it's amazing what we can do for free or very little money. There are apps that I could use on my iPhone with an $80 converter. That's the expense is how you get the guitar into it. And you could make an entire album with one of these. Will it sound as good maybe as the big stuff that we love and know? No, but compared to the amps most of us started out with back in the day, it's phenomenal. I mean, we're in a really cool era in a lot of ways. Let's see. Let's see. I'm skipping a few things here just so we can get to any others. Hey, Hal, I'm glad those tubes working for you. Hey, John Pardo. And I'm skipping some things to get to some others. Sounding stupid. We're going to be wrapping it up in the next 30 minutes or so. And so some comments are about previous things or tell me I'm great, and I appreciate them. I skip them. But I certainly want to get to all the super chats. I appreciate that. Nazis, man. PRS HRDX 20 or Marshall SV20 or maybe even JTM 45, 2245 or the new Studio ST20H. I have not tried the HRDX 20. I've not seen one. I've seen photos of the inside of one. They seem very promising, but until I have one, I don't have an opinion. The SV20 and the JTM 2245, I believe, are the same thing in terms of construction. So it's going to come down to which you like the sound of. I don't know about the ST20H. Is that just a head version? I don't know. I remember being very, very underwhelmed with the 10-inch speaker in the SV20. It's the is it what they call it, the 1030 G10 from Celestion? It really did not sound good, and it was did not live up to the logo, the Marshall logo. I will say that of those choices, I find all the Marshall offerings pretty cynical in that they keep giving you less and less amp. if any other company making the SV20 would never have the balls to charge what Marshall charges for it, regardless of country of origin. I think there are better choices than Marshall for almost everything that they make. And maybe that PRS HRX D20, HDRX20 is that amp. I don't know. I've not played one. I would suggest that you try everything else on the market. In the UK, I don't know what the price differentials are. Like Victories are really expensive here. They seem to be less expensive there, and they make some really nice stuff. I wish I could give you a definitive answer, but I cannot. I would of those. I would expect the PRS to be better than the Marshalls, even without having been inside the PRX, the PRS. From the photos I saw of it, it was much better built than those Marshalls. But maybe your budget might extend to a new or used studio, it's not studio, 20-watt model from Friedman, which would kill any of those Marshalls, certainly. But that's all the advice I can give you without having more information. Sorry. Yeah, I'm not saying that that this is going to replace your 67 Deluxe Reverb, Wes, but compared to the Gorilla that I started out with, this stuff is amazing. And you can certainly do better on a real computer than you can with your phone. But the fact that I could plug into my phone, put on headphones, and have a fully functional practice rig, where if there's a deficiency in my playing, I certainly couldn't blame the gear. Nothing would stop me from having a really good sounding, responsive, tactile environment to play with for practice, or even writing and being creative. And it's good enough quality that if you have an inspired performance that you captured in it, because you can have GarageBand on the damn thing, you could export that to your real project and say, all right, here's the click track. We'll hire, here's the drum machine I used, and we'll get a real drummer into play. And here's the part. I think I really am on something here. We're just going to use this. And we'll just EQ it a little bit, and way to go. It's an amazing thing. Sorry. Hey, Nick Orr. One more. It's got an AB 763 Deluxe Reverb with a mids control. Is there a way, without tools, to know where on the mid pot, where in the mids pot is to the 6.8K resistor? I'm unsure what the pot value taper is. Well, if you have a 10K audio taper pot in there, which is one of the most common ones used, and you turn it to noon, and then you turn it to 3 o'clock and gets a little bit louder and fuller, and then from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock it only gets a little louder and a little fuller, then you've probably got the 10K pot, in which case about 3 o'clock, 3:30 is going to be equivalent to the 6.8K you'd find in Deluxe Reverb typically. If you turn it from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, and it gets a little bit louder, a little bit fuller. Then up to noon, it gets a little bit louder and fuller. And then above 1 o'clock, it gets really loud and full. You probably got a 100K audio taper, which is what I like to do because the first half of the range is 10K. In which case, about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock would be what you'd find in a Deluxe Reverb. But the larger issue there is just turn it till you like the sound of. Just until you like the sound. It doesn't matter if it's 6.8K, it doesn't matter if it's 7K, it doesn't matter if it's 3K. If you like the sound, you found it. And, and later if you open the amp up and get in there with a meter, you can measure and say, oh, I really like the sound of that. And it turns out that it's 3.4K. Okay, well, if I ever build one of these without the mids pot, I'll just have the tech change the 6.8K to 3.4K, and away you go. You'll have your sound. And every pub, not every pub, I'm going to try to avoid most of the chain pubs, Wes. I'm going to be trying to find the good ones. And we're staying in Bloomsbury, so there are some very good ones there. And we're staying right north of Holborn, so there's some really nice historic pubs just around where we are and just south of us. So our locals won't suck. Our last night, coming back from Oxford, we're staying over North Kensington. We're staying over by Paddington Station, so it's easier to get to Heathrow the next morning. And I'll have to try some other locals while I'm in that neighborhood. Uh, Manzi, yeah, I think they're still going with the eel and pie house. I will be trying the pie and mash. I will not be trying the jellied eels, not out of a fear of eels. I just don't like eels at all. I've had them. I don't care about the temperature or consistency. I don't like eels, but I understand their historic importance. But I'll be trying the pie and mash with liquor. That's for damn sure. I'm reading the comments from my is being apolitical a form of you know shirking responsibility section from earlier, and reading your comments makes me like you guys even more. I've got some good people here, and I want you to know how much I appreciate finding this out. I have long suspected that most of you are really good guys, and it's nice to see it in ink, so to speak. Thanks, Oz Cullen. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Let's see. Is it possible to make a Princeton reverb sound like a deluxe reverb, keeping the 10-inch speaker? I mean, tone wise, not volume wise. Thank you. Yeah, they already sound very similar. The Princeton reverb is very similar in most ways to the deluxe reverb. The phase inverter is different. If the main thing you want to do is you want to lower the mids, because even though they have the same circuit and the same 6.8K mids resistor, the 10-inch speaker and the dimensions of the Princeton cab mean that it's going to be more mid-range forward. So I would say experiment with the 6.8K resistor, and anywhere from pretty much 1.5K to 4.7K will probably get you what you want. But what you want is going to be what you want. I can't know that. So without adding a mids pot, I would, if you were here and I was doing that for you, I'd put 10 pin in a pot and say, we're going to turn, you play, I'm going to turn this, you tell me when to stop. When you stop, I measure it and say, all right, you like a 3.7K and I got a 3.6K here, that'll be close enough, and put that in place. It just brings back the boxiness to the Princeton. And some guys on a Princeton enjoy having a bright cap. Stock Deluxe Reverb's got a 47 picofarad bright cap, which can be kind of too bright on the reverb channel of a Deluxe Reverb, but it can be really nice on a Princeton, which is for various reasons not quite as bright. So 47 picofarad, 68 picofarad is a pretty good range to play around with. You can go smaller if you want. Those are two very easy things to do. You're changing one resistor, and you can only have to remove the 6.8K. You can put others in parallel. Put a 6.8K across a 6.8K, and now you got 3.4. It's real simple. And adding a bright cap is very easy. These are all non-destructive, non-permanent changes to tweak things. But before you do any of that, make sure you like the speaker. The 10-inch speaker is what the Princeton lives and dies by, and there's some fantastic ones and there's some awful ones. I'd rather start by a speaker. I'm like, hey, let me try these 5 speakers. That's the one, and then you tweak from there, as opposed to keep tweaking the amp, and the whole time you don't know that you're just fighting against the sound of the Eminence custom-made for Fender speaker that just sounds terrible. Something to learn practice. Are you learned to recone on? I don't know. I don't know what's a good candidate to learn reconing on, because I don't recone things. I would think not, though, because I think the 12L6 is a good enough speaker that it deserves to live, and most people learning to recone will make a mistake. I think you should probably find some used, dead, not fantastic speakers to practice on. And I would contact someone who does this and say, hey, what's the thing that I can most easily get the kits for? Because there's a voice coil kit and the cones and all this stuff, and you have to know all these measurements and stuff. Smithsonian's got tons of paintings, but it depends on which Smithsonian you go to. I'll get to the Smithsonian stuff. If the chat goes a little bit over today, so be it. If we're going to talk about museums, it's my channel. I can talk about museums if I want to. Let's see. Yeah, I'm never going to get through all the questions today. I'm going to get through. I'm going to catch the super chats, and we're going to talk about museums and stuff, and then we'll wrap it up for the day. I'm sorry. I could be here 12 hours and I'd never get through all the questions sometimes. Sorry. Hey, Lloyd, I appreciate that. Thank you. Greetings again from Wales. Well, greetings to you from Memphis, though. I'll be a lot closer to you very soon. I appreciate that. And I hope someday to get to your beautiful country. And I know it's part of the UK, but Wales is Wales. We all know this, right? And it is beautiful. And I have a deep, abiding love for and fascination with Dylan Thomas. I hope that Wales, in reality, matches the Wales that he's put in my mind for all these decades. I imagine that it's still there, the good and the bad of it, which is certainly in Dylan Thomas. But I hope to experience it for myself someday. To everyone whose question I'm not getting to today, please come back next time, which is going to be in 3 weeks from today, and try to ask questions earlier in the chat, because I try to give real answers, which means I can only answer so many questions an hour. I can't get through 30 questions in an hour. I have many experiences with the 76 Fender Twins. They're very good amps. 750 Canadian. That's very inexpensive in U.S. dollars, I believe. I imagine that you would find a line of people to buy that, with the exception that in general, right now, it seems to be that the Twins and the Super Reverbs are selling for a lower price than the Princetons and the Deluxes and the Vibroluxes, because people don't want the weight, people don't want the size, and stage volumes are necessarily getting lower. So the Super Reverbs and the Twins are a little less in fashion, but they're phenomenal amps, and both, not only can you add a master volume easily, or some 76s on the Twins have pretty good master volumes, but the world of load box, of really good quality reactive loads with IRs, is getting to be much more affordable. You can get the Sur for like $600. Now the issue is with the Twin, it's got a 4 ohm output. Sur is 8 ohm, but you can do that mismatch safely. You could take that amp into a Sur load box with reactive load IR and give your front of house a fantastic sound, and sidestep all that. But a 76 Twin, when restored properly, with all the issues that can happen in 50 years removed, is going to be as good as a 2-rock that's going to cost $5,000. $5,000 US. I don't know what that is Canadian. More, I would imagine. Hey, Captain Grumpus. Yeah, I'm experimenting with the Stomp, and oh, cool. People liked the Stomp video and pedalboard stuff. Yeah, I talked about this at the beginning of the stream, and you can go back. But yeah, it's fun. A lot of different sounds, a lot of bad sounds, and then some really good ones. And then there are some really great sounds you've got to work really hard to get. So it's not as advertised. And I think a lot of people will give up. A lot of people will be scared off. It's not what the right thing for them is. And a lot of people will have not had experience with great amps, so they won't know that what they have in the preset that they bought from someone is really not that fantastic. All right, yeah, people talking about IPAs and my dislike for them. Sourdough is ubiquitous. I wish it was ubiquitous. Sourdough is awesome, but it is harder and harder to find really good sourdough in a lot of places in America, at least. Oh, yeah, porter, nut brown ale over IPA any day, Ted. Yeah, I'm looking forward to all kinds of ales and lagers and bitters and stouts, but not Guinness. I'm not a fan of Guinness. I'll probably try a sip of my wife's while we're there. I've always heard it's much better over there, and of course they're going to say it's better in Dublin, and maybe that's true, and maybe we'll have to go there someday. But I'm still not a fan of Guinness. Thank you, Ironman33. What impedance, should I select with a combo amp that has 8 ohm internal speakers with an 8 ohm extension cabinet? If you have 8 ohm internal speakers and an 8 ohm extension cabinet, usually that's going to be run in parallel, so you have a total load of 4 ohms. So if the amp has a 4 ohm setting, that's what you would choose. Make sure that it's not a setup that's going to disconnect the internal speakers when you plug into the extension cabinet. Some amps like the AC30 Custom Series, there's the external and the this is like external. There's aux. If you plug into external, it bypasses the internal speaker. If you plug into auxiliary speakers, it adds them all together. That's pretty easy to hear. Do you hear both sets of speakers working? Okay, that's parallel. Then before, I can't imagine that they'd be doing it in series. That'd just be really complicated. So 4 ohms is the answer you're looking for there. I will be coming back through and reading everyone's comments that I'm missing now, because I like to know these things, especially people are talking about traveling to England in general and London. I want to see what everyone's saying, but I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anything. In the meantime, I've got 10 minutes left. Let's see if I'm missing any super chats. Yes, there's one. Plexico. And again, I'm not trying to say, oh, the super chats are more important than the rest of you. I try to answer the questions at least the first 2 hours as they come in. But if someone has done a super chat, I'm damn sure going to reply to them because they gave me money, and it would be disrespectful for me to say, oh, thanks for the super chat. I didn't actually get to it. 2007 Handwired or TBX AC30, which would you pick and why? Thank you to the best voice on the internet. Thanks, Duncan. I don't think I have the best voice on the internet, but I probably have the best voice in this room at the moment. The 2007 Handwired has got a real problem in the reverb implementation. The reverb addition to that thing was just dreadful, and it just sucks all the joy out of Mudville and just really kills the response of that channel. I've got 2 or more videos up on that amp on the channel, and once you undo that stupid reverb thing, just take it out, and I show how to change the filtering to make it sound more JMI-like. That is a really good sounding amp, and for less work, it can be made into a great amp. The TBX AC30 gives you everything that a JMI can be in terms of all 3 channels with a tremolo and the normal and the top boost, but it takes a lot more work to undo the factory stupids. It's got built-in ground loops. It's got really noisy signal runs. It's got a power transformer that more than half the time these days seems to be emitting a noise field because it was a cheap POS. So made in England. I love England. I'm an Anglophile. I'm going there soon. This is not a slam against England, but the made in UK amps from Vox are not necessarily better. They also made a lot of cars that Americans don't know about because no one else in the world would buy them. It was pretty much just Nigeria and England, and Nigeria didn't have a choice at the time. They had talks about that. It's a whole thing. I think if England if the British Empire had not even better cars, just good cars, I think fewer countries would have wanted their independence so fervently in the 60s. There's some politics for you. It's not so much that we don't get representation. It's that we're being asked to drive this and call it a car, and meanwhile our neighbors have Peugeots. It was a whole horrible thing. So anyway, of those 2 choices, neither is perfect. The Handwired needs less work to be made really good, but when work is done to the TBX, that is a fantastic amp once done, and that can include changing out the power transformer for one that doesn't go bzzz unless that's your choice. Go for it. Some stuff there, a pedal show and Uncle Larry and talking about Rhett here. I'll go back and look at this. I don't consider myself to be. I don't know. Some of these guys are true YouTube celebrities, and I'm just a guy in his room talking to amps most of the time. Thanks, John Pardo. I appreciate that very much for every possible reason. I think you understand what I'm saying. Yeah, living here in Memphis, Tennessee, it's those of us who know our history are doomed to watch the others do the same stupid. Anyway, yeah. Oh, Bloomsbury in London, fuck classy. Yeah, well, that's my experience. That's my intent there. We're gonna fuck classy. And Bloomsbury is great because it's the summer term, so the local university is not in session, and we got a place about a block and a half from King's Cross and St. Pancras and the British Library for very little money, which is not an easy thing to do in London. And we are about a 1-minute walk from Russell Square, and diagonally on the other side of Russell Square is the British Museum. And that's all I really need out of the whole trip, but we're going to be going more than that. And it's 30 minutes from there to Westminster, and we're going to be going everywhere and enjoying as much as possible. And between that, and we're not going to have any large meals, we've decided. We're going to have a series of small meals and sharing things so we can taste as many things as possible. And if we find something we have to have more of, then we know we need to have more of that. But we're not going to spend a ton of time trying one thing only to find that it's okay. We're going to try a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We're going to snack our way across a world city, and then we'll come back towards the end of the trip and do the greatest hits and focus on those. Let's see. Yeah, we will be walking to the British Museum. I'll be walking from. I plan on walking to the Tate Britain and stuff like that. I'll be doing. We'll take the tube. When we go to the Tower and we go to East London, and there's one neighborhood I can't remember the name of right now. We're going to go take the tube about 10 minutes out to the northeast because we're going to go see the William Morris Museum. I can't remember the name of the little borough it's in, but you got a Hi-Fi Bass Dumont is wearing an Omega Seamaster. Nice. From the 70s. I am preparing for my trip. I'm wearing the Casio Royale World Time. Smithsonian better than the Louvre, you say. Well, I got to argue with you there. Smithsonian different from the Louvre. I've been to both. I have seen, I think, almost all of the Smithsonian. I have seen most of the Louvre. The Louvre is everything in one place, and the Smithsonian is all spread out. And I love both. I will say this, they have very different vibes. But I will say in this one way, the Louvre is better than the Smithsonian. It's not anything the Smithsonian has any control over. The Smithsonian does not have the winged victory of Samothrace. And to stand at the base of those steps and look up and see her resplendent above you is one of the great experiences in life. All of human accomplishment can be summed up in that one work of art, not only in terms of the technical skill necessary to construct the monument, not even the technical skill necessary to bring it 3,000 miles from Samothrace back to Paris, and not even the skill necessary to quarry the marble or the artistic skill to sculpt it, but also the beauty of the female form in a non-hypersexualized manner. The grace is everything. Is everything in one thing, and it's right there in that grand staircase. And the Smithsonian ain't got that. No place got that. Samothrace ain't got that either. So there's. There we go. It is the spoils of the British Empire, but I will see it while I can. I with all the awareness. For instance, the African masks, which should be returned. I will see them before they are eventually returned, because I probably in my lifetime won't get to go to see the museum that they are building to receive them. And I will see the Elgin marbles again, because it's going to be a long time before I get to go to Greece. And given what happened with Greece since the time Lord Elgin bought them or was given them, they've had so many civil wars and so many invasions and the Nazis, and things have been blown up with dynamite. So would they have still been around if they'd still been there? I don't know. It's not my place to say. But I do know that I will see them. If they eventually go back to Athens, that's great, but I'm not going to be making it to Athens anytime soon. I'll see them there. And that goes for all kinds of things in the British Museum, including the Easter Island stone statue. But they have things that they have every right to, and I really look forward to seeing not only revisiting the Anglo-Saxon stuff, but they have found some new additions. They just found a Byzantine brass bowl that has come from North Africa. It has scenes of North Africa, and they found it there at Sutton Hoo, and they've just added that to the. I'm sorry, I know most of you don't care, but those of you who do, here we are. This is my world, and this is what I'm going for. And then we'll come back. I'll talk about amps again. So we're gonna wrap this up. We're right here at 3 hours now, and I'll go back and see all the comments that I've missed and everyone whose questions I have not gotten to. Come back. We'll do this again. I try to get through everything, but what? 674 people are here. I cannot possibly answer 674 questions in 3 hours. I am grateful to each and every one of you. This response, the people, so many people are interested in my little world is amazing. And I'm just scrolling, and I'm not getting to the current caught up yet. This might be one of the biggest audiences I've had. Maybe it's because I did the 5 Watt World video yesterday. Maybe I have a whole bunch of new subscribers. I've not checked the analytics, but if that's the case, thank you, welcome. And I do ramble about art and literature and music and stuff like that from time to time. But I'll also tell you how to make your Marshall do that really cool thing when that's the right thing to talk about. Anyway, it's weird seeing this many people, and yet it's not real because they're just names on a screen. I mean this. I'm going to go through and read all the replies and all the comments made while the stream was live, because I like to know things about you guys. I like to get to know you as much as it's possible to do this. The same way I've enjoyed getting to know Keith, the same way I've gotten to enjoy getting to know Jeff and other people that you guys might know about from YouTube channels, except Wes. He's an absolute asshole. True, we are all just AI bots. Maybe I'm the AI bot. Last thing on that subject, that reCAPTCHA, prove you're not a robot thing, like click on every picture with a bicycle. it always says I'm a goddamn robot, and it leaves me with the severe crisis, philosophical crisis of, all right, that's a wheel, and that's the frame, and that's the seat, and that's the handlebar. But here's just the tip of a handlebar. Here's just one little bit of a pedal. Does the edge of a pedal denote bicycle? How much of a bicycle has to be in the picture before it's a picture of a bicycle? I mean, that pedal, it's like a third of one pedal, but that pedal is a bicycle pedal. So is that a bicycle picture? Anyway, I have my philosophy. The computers have theirs. They all think I am a motherfucking robot. See you next week.